Grief is not a straight line. It is not a tunnel with light at the end. Nor is it a mountain you climb over to see the sun on the other side. Deborah Fisher had learned, over 1,825 days, that grief was more like a dense, freezing fog. It settled into the cracks of your floorboards. It dampened your clothes. And it sat heavy in your lungs until you forgot what it felt like to take a full, clean breath. It had been 5 years. 5 years since Nathan Fisher drove his silver Ford F-150 to the hardware store on a Tuesday evening to buy light bulbs and never came back. No skid marks. No pinged cell phone towers. No credit card activity. Just a void where a man used to be. The rain was hammering against the siding of their small, 2-story house in Portland, Oregon. It was a relentless, cold November rain that made the windows rattle. Deborah stood at the kitchen sink, scrubbing a lasagna pan, the abrasive sound of the steel wool masking the storm outside. Her hands were red and chapped. Double shifts at the diner were taking their toll. But the mortgage didn't care about her fatigue. And neither did the braces Isaac would need next month. "Mom, can I play video games for 30 more minutes?" Deborah turned. Isaac was leaning against the doorframe. At 10 years old, he was the spitting image of his father, the same messy sandy blonde hair. The same scattering of freckles across the bridge of his nose. But his eyes were Deborah's, dark, watchful, and currently filled with a pleading hopefulness. "Is your homework done, Isaac?" she asked, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "Yes, math and reading." "Did you brush your teeth?" "Mom, it's only 7:30, he groaned, rolling his eyes in that dramatic way preteens practiced in the mirror. Deborah smiled. A tired curve of her lips. "Fine, 30 minutes. But if I hear that console on at 8:01, you lose it for a week." "Yes." Isaac pumped his fist and scrambled back toward the living room. Deborah turned back to the window above the sink. All she could see was her own reflection ghosting against the black glass, a woman of 35 who looked 40. Dark circles under her eyes. Hair tied back in a messy bun. She touched the cold glass. "Where are you, Nathan?" she thought. A habitual prayer she didn't even realize she was praying anymore. "Are you cold? Are you hurt? Are you even on this earth?" Most people told her to move on. The detectives had stopped calling 3 years ago. Her sister, Sarah, kept trying to set her up on dates with divorced accountants. "He's gone, Deb," Sarah would say gently. "You have to live for Isaac." She was living for Isaac. That was the only reason she got out of bed. But she hadn't declared Nathan dead. She couldn't, not without a body. Thump. It wasn't a knock. It was a heavy sound against the front door. Like a wet sandbag hitting the wood. Deborah froze. She turned off the faucet. The house went silent, save for the muffled sounds of explosions from Isaac's video game in the next room. Thump, thump. It came again, heavier, more deliberate. Deborah's heart hammered against her ribs. It was late. They lived at the end of a cul-de-sac that backed into the woods. Nobody came here this late, especially in this weather. "Isaac," she called out. Her voice sharp. "Turn the TV down. Now." The sudden silence in the living room was deafening. Deborah dried her hands quickly. Her instincts flaring, she walked into the hallway, grabbing the heavy brass umbrella stand by the coat rack. It wasn't a weapon, but it was heavy. She approached the door. The peephole was blurred with rain. Useless. "Who is it?" she demanded. Her voice trembling slightly but loud enough to be heard through the oak. Silence. Then, a voice. Rough. Broken. like gravel grinding together. Deb? The umbrella stand slipped from her fingers and clattered loudly onto the hardwood floor. The world tilted on its axis. The air left the room. That voice. It was deeper, cracked, parched, but she knew the cadence. She knew the pitch. She fumbled with the deadbolt, her fingers numb and clumsy. She unlocked the chain. She threw the door open. The wind and rain lashed at her face instantly, blinding her for a second. A man stood on the porch step. He was emaciated, his clothes were dark, soaked through, and hung off his frame like rags on a scarecrow. He had a thick, unkempt beard that hid half his face, and his hair was matted against his skull. He was shivering violently. But the eyes, the blue-gray eyes staring out from the hollow sockets. "Nathan?" she whispered. The sound was barely a breath. The man swayed. He reached out a hand, scarred, dirty, trembling, and touched the doorframe for support. I made it home," he rasped. And then he collapsed. The next hour was a blur of chaotic adrenaline. Deborah didn't call the police immediately. She didn't call an ambulance. Instinct took over, a primal need to protect, to hide, to nurture. She dragged him inside, his body surprisingly heavy despite his thin frame. "Isaac, get blankets." Now, she had screamed. Isaac had stood at the hallway entrance, frozen, his face pale as a sheet. "Dad?" he had squeaked. "Isaac, move." They got him onto the sofa. Deborah stripped off his soaking wet jacket. It was a generic military surplus coat, smelling of damp wool and mud. Underneath, he wore a gray t-shirt that was stained and torn. She ran to the kitchen, boiling water, grabbing the first aid kit. When she returned, Isaac was kneeling by the sofa, tears streaming down his face, holding the man's cold, limp hand. "Is he dead, Mom?" Isaac sobbed. "No, baby, no, he's exhausted. He's cold." The man, Nathan, groaned. His eyelids fluttered. He looked at Isaac. A slow, painful smile spread through the thick beard. "Buddy," Nathan whispered, "you got so big." Isaac buried his face in his father's chest, wailing. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated relief, the release of 5 years of pent-up sorrow. Deborah stood over them, clutching a warm towel, tears blurring her own vision. It was a miracle. It was the impossible thing she had prayed for. He was here. He was alive. But as she stepped closer to wrap the towel around his shivering shoulders, a strange sensation prickled the back of her neck. She leaned in to wipe the mud from his forehead. As she did, she inhaled. She expected the smell of rain, of mud, of body odor, perhaps, from a long journey, and those smells were there. But beneath them, sharp and stinging, was something else. It was a chemical smell. Acrid, metallic, cordite. The smell of spent gunpowder. Not fresh, but ingrained in his skin, as if he had been living in a firing range. Deborah paused. Nathan worked in construction management. He didn't hunt. He hated guns. When they had dated, he refused to even go to a shooting range because loud noises startled him, a remnant of a childhood car accident. Maybe he was held captive. She reasoned quickly, pushing the doubt down. Maybe he was somewhere dangerous. God knows what he's been through. "I'm going to make some soup," she announced, her voice sounding overly bright, brittle in the heavy room. "You need to eat." Nathan sat up slowly, wincing as he shifted his weight. "That sounds good, Deb. God, it's good to see you." He looked at her then. His eyes locked onto hers. They were intense, predatory, almost, but then the look vanished, replaced by a soft, weary warmth. "I missed you so much." "I missed you too," she whispered. She retreated to the kitchen, needing a moment to breathe. She turned on the stove. Her hands were shaking. She grabbed a block of cheddar cheese and a cutting board. Isaac loved grilled cheese with tomato soup. It was comfort food. She heard them talking in the living room. Isaac's excited chatter. Nathan's low, rumbling responses. "I need a knife," a voice said right behind her. Deborah jumped, spinning around. Nathan was standing in the kitchen doorway. He moved silently. For a man who had just collapsed from exhaustion, he had crossed the hardwood floor without making a sound. "Jesus, Nathan, you scared me." "Sorry," he murmured. He walked into the kitchen. He moved differently. The Nathan she knew had a heavy, flat-footed walk. This man moved on the balls of his feet. Balanced. Ready. "I wanted to help," he said. "I can't just sit there. Makes me feel useless." "You need to rest." "Let me cut the cheese," he said, reaching for the knife on the counter. It was her expensive chef's knife. The one she kept razor sharp. Deborah hesitated, then stepped back. "Okay. Just be careful. It's sharp." Nathan picked up the knife. The old Nathan was clumsy in the kitchen. He held a knife like a hammer, chopping with brute force, terrified of slicing a finger. Deborah usually banned him from prep work because he mangled the vegetables. This man didn't hold the knife like a hammer. He flipped it in his hand, a casual, unconscious twirl, testing the weight and balance. His grip shifted instantly into a pinch grip, professional and precise. He placed the block of cheddar on the board. Chop, chop, chop. The sound was rhythmic, machine gun fast. The blade moved in a blur. In seconds, the block of cheese was reduced to perfectly uniform slices, each exactly 3 millimeters thick. He didn't look at his hands. He was looking at Deborah, smiling a crooked, charming smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Remember how much I love your grilled cheese?" he asked. Deborah stared at the perfect slices. She stared at the hand holding the knife, steady, unwavering, no tremor of exhaustion anymore. She looked up at his face. It was Nathan's face. It was Nathan's voice. It was Nathan's smile. But the man who left 5 years ago couldn't slice cheese like a Michelin star sushi chef. The man who left 5 years ago flinched at loud noises. The man who left 5 years ago smelled of sawdust and Old Spice. Not rain and burnt gunpowder. A cold stone dropped into Deborah's stomach. She forced a smile, terrified that if she let it slip, the man holding the 8-inch blade would notice. "I remember," she said softly. "Good," Nathan said. He set the knife down. The tip pointed directly at her heart. "I'm starving." Outside, thunder cracked, shaking the house. Inside, Deborah Fisher looked at the stranger wearing her husband's face. And for the first time in 5 years, she wasn't afraid of being alone. She was afraid that she wasn't. The smell of grilled cheese and tomato soup had always been the scent of comfort in the Fisher household. It was the smell of rainy Tuesdays, of sick days, of simple, uncomplicated love. But tonight, as the aroma filled the small kitchen, it made Deborah's stomach turn. She watched him eat. Nathan, or the man wearing Nathan's face, sat at the head of the small oak dining table. He ate with a terrifying efficiency. He didn't shovel the food in, he dismantled it. He tore the sandwich into precise strips. dipping each one into the soup and consuming it with a rhythmic, mechanical jaw motion. He didn't look at the food. His eyes, those piercing blue-gray eyes that were just a shade too cold, were fixed on Isaac. "So," the man said, his voice raspy but gaining strength with every bite. "Fifth grade, huh? You playing baseball this year?" Isaac beamed, his face smeared with tomato soup. "Dad, I quit baseball 2 years ago. I'm into robotics now. I told you in my letters, well, the letters I wrote but couldn't send." The man paused. The sandwich strip hovered halfway to his mouth. A flicker of something passed through his eyes. A calculation? A database search in a biological hard drive? "Right," he said smoothly, recovering instantly. "Robotics. That's even better. Smart kid. Takes after your mother." Deborah gripped her water glass so hard she thought it might shatter. "Takes after your mother." The real Nathan used to joke that Isaac's brains came from his side because Deborah couldn't do long division to save her life. It was a standing family joke. This man didn't know the joke. "Where were you, Dad?" Isaac asked, his voice dropping to a whisper. "The police said you were gone," Mom said. He glanced at Deborah, then back at his father. "Where did you go?" The kitchen went silent. The rain lashed against the window pane. A chaotic drum roll. The man set his sandwich down. He looked at his hands, scarred, calloused, the knuckles swollen. He took a long, slow breath. "It's complicated, buddy," he said. "I hit my head badly. For a long time. I didn't know who I was. I was confused, wandering. It took me a long time to remember the way home. It was a lie. Deborah knew it in her bones. Amnesia didn't give you the ability to wield a chef's knife like a combat weapon. Amnesia didn't leave the smell of cordite on your skin. Amnesia didn't make you scan the room for exits every 30 seconds. Which is exactly what he was doing. But you're here now," Isaac said, his voice trembling with hope. "I'm here now," the man confirmed. He reached out and ruffled Isaac's hair. Deborah saw Isaac flinch. Just a tiny, microscopic movement. The real Nathan had heavy hands. But his touch was gentle. This man's hand was heavy. Like a lead weight. "Isaac," Deborah said, her voice sounding thin and stretched. "Finish up. It's a school night. You need to get to bed." "But Mom." "Now, Isaac." The tone brokered no argument. Isaac slumped, shoveling the last of his food into his mouth. The man watched him, a small, unreadable smile playing on his lips. Getting Isaac to sleep took 20 minutes. He was wired. Adrenaline coursing through his small body. Deborah had to promise him 3 times that his father would still be there in the morning before he finally closed his eyes. When she came back downstairs, the living room was empty. Panic, cold and sharp, spiked in her chest. She hurried to the kitchen. Empty. "Nathan?" she called out. "In here." The voice came from the downstairs bathroom. The door was ajar. Steam billowed out, carrying the scent of her lavender body wash, a strange, floral scent for a man who used to insist on unscented bar soap. Deborah pushed the door open slightly. He was standing in front of the mirror. A towel wrapped low around his hips. He was shaving the thick beard with a disposable razor she kept for her legs. Deborah stopped dead in the doorway. Her breath caught in her throat. The real Nathan had been soft. He was a project manager for a construction firm. He spent his days in a truck or an office. He had, dad bod, a softness around the middle. Undefined arms. The man in the mirror was carved out of granite. His back was a map of violence. Ridges of scar tissue crisscrossed his shoulder blades. There was a puckered, star-shaped scar on his lower right flank. A bullet wound? A shrapnel entry? His muscles were ropey and taut, coiled like steel cables under pale skin. He caught her eyes in the reflection. He didn't cover up. He didn't turn away in modesty. He simply continued to scrape the razor down his cheek, revealing the jawline she knew so well. "I used your razor," he said. "Hope you don't mind." The beard, it felt like a mask. "Nathan," she whispered. She stepped into the small, humid room. "You're back. What happened to you?" He rinsed the razor. The water swirled pink with blood and foam. "Rough few years, Deb. Like I said, I got into some bad situations. Drifter life isn't kind." "That looks like a bullet hole," she said, pointing to his side. He turned slowly. Water dripped from his wet hair onto his chest. His chest was just as scarred. But there, right on his lower abdomen, was the faint, white line of an appendectomy scar. Deborah stared at it. "He has the scar." Her mind reeled. She had been so sure. But there it was. The surgery Nathan had when he was 12. Unless they knew? Unless they had surgically altered him to match? "I got shot," he admitted, his voice low. "Hunting accident. Wrong place. Wrong time. Didn't have insurance. Patched it up myself." He stepped closer. The small bathroom suddenly felt claustrophobic. He smelled of lavender and raw, masculine heat. He loomed over her. "Deb," he said softly. He reached out, his hand cupping her cheek. His thumb brushed her lip. His skin was rough. His temperature ran hot, fever hot. "I've missed this," he murmured. He leaned in. Deborah's instinct screamed run. Every nerve ending in her body fired a warning signal. This was not her husband. This was a predator wearing her husband's skin. She pulled back, stumbling slightly. I can't," she stammered. "Not yet. It's too much. I'm sorry." The man froze. For a second, his eyes went flat, devoid of humanity. Then, the mask slipped back on. The hurt, understanding husband returned. "Of course," he said, stepping back, giving her space. "I'm rushing. I'm sorry. It's just been so long. I have a migraine." Deborah lied. The lie tasted like ash. "I'm going to sleep in the guest room tonight. Just to give us both space to process." "Okay," he said. "I'll take the couch." "No," she said quickly. "Take the bed. You've been out there. You deserve a real bed. And I need a lock on my door." She didn't say. Midnight. The house settled into its nightly groans and creaks. The rain had stopped, leaving behind a heavy, dripping silence. Deborah lay in the guest room on the second floor. She had pushed a heavy dresser in front of the door. She was fully dressed, clutching her cell phone like a lifeline. She couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the knife spinning in his hand. She needed to know. Slowly, painfully slowly, she moved the dresser back. She opened the door. The hallway was dark. She crept toward the master bedroom. The door was open. She stood in the threshold, listening. 5 years ago, sleeping next to Nathan was like sleeping next to a tractor engine. He had severe sleep apnea. He snored. He choked. He gasped. Without his CPAP machine, the walls shook. Deborah listened. Silence. Absolute, total silence. She crept closer to the bed. The moonlight filtered through the blinds, casting stripes across the duvet. The man lay on his back. His arms were at his sides. Not relaxed, but straight. He wasn't moving. He wasn't snoring. His breathing was so shallow, so controlled, that his chest barely rose. It was the sleep of a soldier in hostile territory. The sleep of someone who had trained themselves to be invisible, even when unconscious. Deborah stood over him, tears stinging her eyes. The appendectomy scar might be there. The face might be right. But the man who snored like a bear was gone. This silent ghost was something else. She reached into her pocket. She had taken his wallet from his wet jeans while he was showering. She pulled it out now, angling it toward the moonlight. It was an old leather wallet. Inside, there was a faded picture of her and Isaac. A Blockbuster card. His old driver's license. Everything was perfect. Too perfect. It was a time capsule. But as she went to slide the license back in, her thumb brushed against the hidden pocket behind the billfold. She felt something thin, metallic. She dug her fingers in and pulled it out. It was a SIM card. But not a normal SIM card. It was black, with no carrier branding, and a series of gold Cyrillic letters stamped on the back. Russian. Her breath hitched. Suddenly, a hand shot out from the bed. It was a blur of motion. Before she could scream, before she could even gasp, a hand clamped around her throat. She was yanked down. The world spun. She landed hard on the mattress. The SIM card flying from her hand onto the carpet. The man was on top of her instantly. His weight was crushing. His forearm pressed against her windpipe, cutting off her air. His eyes were wide open. They weren't sleepy. They were wide, alert, and terrifyingly clear. "Deb?" he said. The pressure on her throat vanished as quickly as it had appeared. He pulled back, looking horrified. He held his hands up in surrender. Deborah gasped, coughing, scrambling backward off the bed until her back hit the wall. I'm sorry," he stammered, his voice frantic. "I'm sorry. I had a nightmare. I thought I was back there. I thought you were one of them." He looked at her, his chest finally heaving. "Did I hurt you? Oh God. Deb, did I hurt you?" Deborah rubbed her throat. Her skin burned where his arm had pinned her. That wasn't a nightmare reflex. That was a takedown. That was a neutralization technique. She looked at the carpet. The tiny black SIM card was lost in the shadows of the deep pile rug. She couldn't look for it now. "I'm fine," she croaked, standing up on shaky legs. I came to check on you." "Don't sneak up on me," he said, his voice dropped an octave. It wasn't a request. It was a warning. "Please, for your own safety, don't ever sneak up on me." Deborah nodded, backing out of the room. "Good night, Nathan," she whispered. "Good night, Deb." She closed the door. She didn't go to the guest room. She went to the hallway closet, grabbed the baseball bat, and sat at the top of the stairs, staring at the bedroom door. She knew two things for certain now. 1. The man in that bed was a lethal weapon. 2. He wasn't leaving until he found whatever he was looking for. And she had a terrible feeling that she and Isaac were the cover he was using to hide from something even worse. Morning light has a way of bleaching out the horrors of the night. It promises a fresh start, a clean slate, but for Deborah Fisher, the morning sun streaming through the kitchen blinds felt like a spotlight on a crime scene. She hadn't slept. She had spent the remaining hours of darkness sitting at the top of the stairs, clutching a baseball bat, listening to the silence of the house. Every creak of the floorboards sounded like a footstep. Every rustle of the wind sounded like an intrusion. But when she walked into the kitchen at 6:30 a.m., The scene was aggressively normal. Nathan was at the stove. He was wearing one of his old flannel shirts. It was tied across his broader shoulders. The fabric straining at the seams, and flipping pancakes. The smell of bacon and maple syrup filled the air, warring with the lingering, metallic scent of fear Deborah couldn't scrub from her memory. "Morning, sleepyhead," Nathan said, turning with a spatula in hand. His smile was easy, relaxed. The predator from last night, the man who had pinned her to the bed with lethal precision, was gone. In his place was the doting father and husband. Isaac was already at the table, drowning a stack of pancakes and syrup. "Mom, Dad made Mickey Mouse pancakes. Look, the ears are perfect." Deborah forced a smile. It felt like her face was made of plaster. "That's great, honey." "Coffee?" Nathan offered, holding out a mug. "Black, 2 sugars. Just how you like it." Deborah took the mug. Her fingers brushed his. His skin was warm, dry, normal. "Thanks," she murmured. She took a sip. It was perfect. Better than she ever made it. "I was thinking," Nathan said, leaning back against the counter, crossing his arms, "I should drive Isaac to school today. Get back into the swing of things. Maybe we can grab some lunch after? Just the 2 of us?" Panic flared in Deborah's chest. "No." The word came out too sharp. Too fast. Isaac looked up, syrup dripping from his fork. Nathan's expression didn't change, but his eyes, they narrowed. Just a fraction. A calculation was being made. "I mean," Deborah stammered, trying to walk back the outburst. "You don't have a license. Yours expired 3 years ago. Nathan, and the registration on my car." "I'll drive carefully," Nathan said, his voice smooth as silk. "Besides, it's just down to Lincoln Elementary. 3 miles. Who's going to stop a dad taking his kid to school?" "Please, Dad," Isaac begged. "I want to show you to my friends. Tommy said his dad is a Marine. But you were gone. That's way cooler." Deborah looked at her son's pleading face. She was trapped. If she refused, she looked crazy. If she agreed, she was putting her son in a car with a stranger who might be a Russian sleeper agent. "I'll drive," Deborah said firmly. "You can come along, but I'm driving." Nathan held her gaze for a long, uncomfortable second. Then, he shrugged. "Fair enough. Shotgun." The drive to Lincoln Elementary was excruciating. Deborah gripped the steering wheel of her Toyota Camry until her knuckles turned white. Nathan sat in the passenger seat, relaxed, one arm resting on the open window frame. But his head was constantly moving. He wasn't looking at the scenery. He was checking the side mirrors. He was scanning the intersections. He was watching the rooftops. "Isaac, did you finish that history project?" Deborah asked, her eyes darting to the rearview mirror to check on her son. "Yeah, Mom, it's in my bag." "Good. Turn right here," Nathan said suddenly. Deborah frowned. "What?" "No, the school is straight ahead on 4th Street. Turn right," Nathan repeated. His voice wasn't loud, but it had a steel core that made Deborah's hands obey before her brain could protest. She yanked the wheel, the tires screeching slightly as they turned onto a residential side street. "Nathan, what are you doing?" she hissed. "Check your mirror, Deb," he said calmly. 3 cars back, black Chevy Suburban, tinted windows, no front plate. Deborah looked. Sure enough, a large black SUV had turned with them. It looked out of place in this neighborhood of manicured lawns and tricycles. "It's just a car," she said, her heart rate spiking. "Is it?" Nathan murmured. Turn left. Now. This is a dead end. Do it. Deborah turned left. The street ended in a cul-de-sac. Don't stop, Nathan commanded. Pull into that driveway. The one with the hedge. Back in. Now. Deborah pulled into the driveway, her breath coming in short gasps. She threw the car into reverse and backed behind the tall hedge. Killing the engine. Dad, what are we doing? Isaac asked from the back seat, sounding more curious than afraid. Are we playing spy? Yeah, buddy, Nathan said, his eyes glued to the side mirror. Just a little game. Stay down. Seconds later, the black Suburban rolled slowly past the end of the street. It paused. The tinted windows revealed nothing. Then, it accelerated and turned away. Deborah let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. Her hands were shaking uncontrollably. Who was that? She whispered. Nathan turned to her. The mask was gone again. His face was grim, hard. I don't know yet, but they've been behind us since we left the driveway. Is it the people who took you? Isaac asked, his voice trembling now. Nathan turned around, his face softening instantly for the boy. No, Isaac, it's just old friends. Bad friends. I owe them some money. Maybe. Don't worry. Daddy handled it. He looked at Deborah. Let's get him to school. Take the back roads. The drop-off lane at Lincoln Elementary was a chaotic sea of minivans and backpacks. Deborah felt sick. Every parent looked like a threat. Every parked car looked like a surveillance van. Have a good day, sport, Nathan said, unbuckling his seatbelt to hug Isaac. Learn something. I will. Bye, Dad. Bye, Mom. Isaac scrambled out of the car, joining the stream of students. Deborah watched him go, her heart aching. She wanted to run after him, grab him, and lock him in a tower. But she couldn't. He's safe there, Nathan said quietly. Schools have cameras, security. It's the safest place for him right now. Safe from what? Deborah snapped, turning on him. The fear was boiling over into anger. Who was in that car? Nathan? And don't tell me it was a loan shark. Loan sharks don't drive government-issue Suburbans. Nathan sighed. He ran a hand through his hair, a nervous tic she didn't recognize. Drive, he said. Let's go to the park by the river. We need to talk. No ears. Deborah hesitated, then put the car in gear. They sat on a park bench overlooking the Willamette River. The water was gray and choppy, reflecting the overcast sky. Joggers passed by, oblivious to the tension radiating from the couple on the bench. You're not Nathan, Deborah said. She hadn't planned to say it. It just came out, a whisper carried on the wind. The man froze. He didn't look at her. He watched a barge moving slowly down the river. I am Nathan Fisher, he said. I know your birthday is June 14th. I know you hate cilantro. I know you cried when we watched Up in the theater. Those are facts, Deborah said, her voice trembling. Anyone can learn facts. You move wrong. You smell wrong. You sleep like a ghost. And last night, you almost killed me. He turned to her then. His eyes were sad. Incredibly, deeply sad. People change, Deb. Trauma changes you. It rewires your brain. It makes you harder. I had to become someone else to survive. To come back to you. Where were you? I can't tell you. Not yet. It's safer if you don't know. That's not good enough. Deborah cried. You bring danger to my house. That car. They were looking for you. Yes, he admitted. They were. Who are they? The people I stole from to get away, Nathan said. He leaned forward. elbows on his knees. Look, Deb, I know I'm different. I know I scare you. But I am your husband. And I am the only thing standing between you and the people in that black car. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the SIM card, the one she had found the night before. You found this, he said. Deborah nodded, throat dry. It's my insurance policy, he said. He held it up to the light. It contains names, account numbers, locations. As long as I have this, they won't kill us. They need it. Us? Deborah whispered. They know you're my weakness. Nathan said. They know Isaac is my heart. If I run, they come for you. If I stay, I can protect you. He looked at her, his expression intense, pleading. I need you to trust me. Deb, just for a little while. Can you do that? Deborah looked at the man. She saw the fear in his eyes, but also a fierce, terrifying determination. She saw the scar on his forehead. She saw the way his hands shook slightly now that the adrenaline was fading. She didn't know if he was her husband, but she knew he was scared. And she knew that whoever was in that black car was real. I don't trust you, Deborah said slowly, but I don't have a choice. Nathan nodded. That's fair. But if you ever, she hissed, leaning in close, ever put Isaac in danger again, I will kill you myself. I don't care who you are. A small, genuine smile touched Nathan's lips. Now that, he said softly, sounds like the Deb I remember. Ring. Deborah's phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out. It was a blocked number. She looked at Nathan. He nodded. Answer it. Put it on speaker. Deborah swiped the screen. Hello? Mrs. Fisher? A voice said. It was smooth, polite, and utterly cold. Yes? This is Detective Miller from the Portland Police Bureau. We found a Ford F-150 registered to your husband in a ravine about 50 miles east of here. Deborah's eyes widened. She looked at Nathan. He was stone-faced. Okay, Deborah said. Is he okay? That's the thing, Mrs. Fisher, the detective said. The truck has been there for years. We're pulling it out now. But we found something inside. What? Bones. Mrs. Fisher. We found skeletal remains in the driver's seat. The world stopped. The river stopped flowing. The birds stopped singing. Deborah stared at the phone. Then she stared at the man sitting next to her. Mrs. Fisher? The detective asked. Are you there? The man next to her didn't blink. He didn't flinch. He just watched her, his blue-gray eyes unreadable, waiting to see which side of the line she would choose. The man in the truck was dead. The man on the bench was alive. Deborah swallowed the scream rising in her throat. I'm here, she whispered. The silence on the line was heavy, filled with the static of a bad connection and the weight of a 5-year-old lie shattering into pieces. Mrs. Fisher? Detective Miller's voice was patient. Practiced. I know this is a shock. We need you to come down to the station. We need to discuss identification. Dental records. Deborah held the phone so tight her fingers ached. Beside her, the man wearing her husband's face sat perfectly still. He didn't reach for the phone. He didn't pull a weapon. He just watched her, his blue-gray eyes locking onto hers with an intensity that burned. Tell him, her mind screamed. Tell the detective he's right here. Tell him there's a stranger sitting on this bench. But then she looked at the man's hand. It was resting on his knee. Relaxed, but she saw the tension in his forearm. She remembered the speed with which he had pinned her to the bed. She remembered the black SUV. If she told the truth now, the police would come. Sirens. Guns. And in the chaos, what would this man do? Would he take a hostage? Would he go back for Isaac? Mrs. Fisher? Deborah swallowed the bile rising in her throat. She made her choice. Not for him, but for Isaac. I can't come in today. She stammered, her voice sounding thin and reedy. I'm actually out of town. Visiting my mother in Seattle. I just got here. The man on the bench exhaled. A tiny, almost imperceptible release of tension. Oh, the detective sounded disappointed. I see. When will you be back? Tomorrow. Deborah lied. I'll come straight to the station tomorrow afternoon. All right, we'll hold the scene. I'm very sorry. Mrs. Fisher, I know you never stop looking. No, Deborah whispered, tears stinging her eyes, tears of rage. Not grief. I never did. She ended the call. The screen went black. She turned to the man. The air between them was electric, charged with violence and deceit. Who is in the truck? She demanded. Her voice wasn't loud, but it was shaking with a fury she hadn't known she possessed. Nobody, Nathan said calmly. Don't you lie to me. She stood up, looming over him. They found skeletal remains. They found a body in your truck at the bottom of a ravine. Who did you kill so you could play dead? Nathan stood up slowly. He looked around the park, ensuring they were alone. Then he stepped close to her, invading her space, his voice dropping to a low rumble. I didn't kill anyone, Deb. It was a cadaver, a medical donation. I bought it from a morgue attendant in Vegas for $5,000. I dressed him in my clothes. I put my watch on his wrist. I drove the truck to the edge, put a brick on the gas pedal, and let it go. Deborah stared at him, horror dawning on her. You staged it? You let me grieve for 5 years? You let Isaac think you abandoned him? You let us bury an empty casket while you were, what? Playing spy? I was protecting you, Nathan hissed. He grabbed her shoulders. His grip was hard. Do you think I wanted to leave? Do you think I wanted to live in filth and hide in shadows? They were coming for me. Deb, if I hadn't died, they would have come for you and Isaac to get to me. My death bought you 5 years of safety. Who are they? Deborah cried, trying to shake him off. The directorate, Nathan said. The name meant nothing to her. But the way he said it, with a mixture of hatred and fear, made her blood run cold. And now that the truck has been found, the clock has run out. They know I didn't die in that crash. They'll run the DNA on the bones and know it's not me. He looked at his watch, a cheap digital thing. Not the Rolex he used to wear. We have maybe 2 hours before the news hits the wire. Before they know, we need to get Isaac. I'm not going anywhere with you. Deborah spat. I'm taking Isaac and I'm going to the police. Nathan's face hardened. He leaned in, his nose inches from hers. The police can't stop a Reaper team. Deb, if you go to the cops, you're just putting a target on their precinct. And when the smoke clears, Isaac will be an orphan. He let go of her shoulders and stepped back, holding out his hand. I am a liar. I am a criminal. I am a ghost. But I am the only person on this earth who knows how to keep that boy alive right now. Please. Deborah looked at his hand. It was scarred, calloused, and trembling slightly. She thought of the black SUV. She thought of the cold efficiency of his movements. Fine, she whispered. We get Isaac. But if you try to take him, if you try to run with him. I won't, Nathan promised. I just want to get us to the safe house. Safe house? Just drive. The drive to Lincoln Elementary was a blur of paranoia. Every red light felt like a trap. Every car in the rearview mirror looked suspicious. "Don't look at them," Nathan instructed as she constantly checked the mirrors. "Keep your eyes forward. Peripheral vision only. If you look, they know you're watching." "Who taught you this?" Deborah asked, her voice tight. "You were a construction manager." "Nathan, you built strip malls." "I was never just a construction manager," he said quietly, staring out the window. "That was the cover. I was an asset. A contractor for off-the-books logistics. I moved things people didn't want moved." "Like what? Drugs? Guns?" "Information," he said, "and people." Deborah felt sick. She had shared a bed for 10 years with a man she didn't know. A stranger. They pulled up to the school. It was 11:30 a.m. Recess. The playground was full of children screaming and running. The chain-link fence separated the innocent world of tag and kickball from the gray reality of the street. "Stay here," Nathan said, unbuckling his seatbelt. "Keep the engine running." "I'm coming with you," Deborah said, reaching for her door handle. "No, you're the getaway driver. If things go south, you drive. You don't wait for me." "Nathan, promise me." "Deb, if I yell, 'Go,' you drive away and you don't look back." Before she could answer, he was out of the car. He moved toward the school gate. He didn't walk like a parent coming to pick up a sick child. He walked with purpose, scanning the perimeter. He adjusted his jacket, checking something at his waist. Deborah watched him approach the intercom at the gate. She saw him talking to the secretary. She saw the gate buzz open. He walked onto the playground. He spotted Isaac near the swings. Isaac saw him. The boy's face lit up. He dropped his kickball and ran toward his father. Deborah's heart squeezed. It was a beautiful, terrible reunion. But then, Nathan stopped. He froze in the middle of the blacktop. Deborah followed his gaze. At the far end of the playground, near the teacher's parking lot, a man was standing by the fence. He was wearing a dark windbreaker and sunglasses. Despite the overcast sky, he wasn't looking at the kids. He was looking at Nathan. The man reached into his jacket. It happened in slow motion. Nathan didn't scream. He didn't wave his arms. He broke into a sprint. He covered the distance to Isaac in 2 seconds. He scooped the boy up, 10 years old and heavy. But Nathan lifted him like a rag doll. "Get down," Nathan roared. The man by the fence pulled out something black. A silencer. Peefed, peefed. 2 puffs of dirt kicked up right where Isaac had been standing a second ago. Screams erupted on the playground. Teachers started blowing whistles, confused, thinking it was a fight. Nathan didn't stop. He pivoted, shielding Isaac with his own body, zigzagging toward the building's side exit, away from the shooter. "Go!" Nathan screamed toward the car. Though Deborah couldn't hear him through the glass. But she saw his mouth. She saw the desperation. "Drive away. You don't wait for me." That was the deal. Deborah slammed her foot on the gas. But she didn't drive away. She drove through the fence. The Toyota Camry roared as it smashed through the rusted chain-link gate of the staff parking lot. Metal screeched against paint. The car bucked, debris flying. The shooter turned, startled by the noise. Deborah gripped the wheel, aiming the heavy sedan directly at the man in the windbreaker. "Get away from my son," she screamed, though no one could hear her. The shooter realized too late that the suburban mom in the Camry wasn't hitting the brakes. He dove to the side, rolling over the hood of a parked minivan. Deborah slammed on the brakes, the car skidding to a halt on the asphalt. smoking and battered. She threw the passenger door open. "Get in, get in." Nathan was there in a heartbeat. He threw Isaac into the back seat and dove into the passenger side. "Get down, Isaac. Floorboards. Now," Nathan yelled. "Mom? Dad? What's happening?" Isaac was sobbing, curled into a ball. "Drive, Deb. Go. Reverse," Nathan barked. The shooter was getting up. He was raising the gun again. Deborah slammed the gear stick into reverse. The tires smoked. She backed out of the parking lot, clipping a trash can, spinning the wheel wildly. Crack. The back windshield shattered. Glass rained down on Isaac. "He's shooting at us," Isaac screamed. "Keep your head down." Nathan unbuckled his seatbelt. He turned around in his seat, reaching for something under his jacket. Deborah floored it, the car fishtailing onto the main road. She didn't look back, she just drove, running the red light at the intersection, horns blaring around them. "Is he following?" Deborah gasped, her heart hammering so hard she thought she might pass out. Nathan was watching out the back where the window used to be. He held a black pistol in his hand, a gun she hadn't known he had. "He's trying," Nathan said grimly, "but you took out his knees when you forced him to jump." "Nice driving, Deb." I wrecked the car." She stuttered, hysterical laughter bubbling up in her throat. "I wrecked the damn car." "You saved our lives," Nathan said. He reached over and put a hand on her shoulder. His grip was solid. "But now we have a problem." "What?" "That wasn't a warning shot," Nathan said, checking the magazine of his pistol. "That was a liquidation team. They aren't trying to capture us anymore. They're cleaning house." He looked at Isaac, who was shaking in the back seat, covered in safety glass. "We can't go to the safe house," Nathan said darkly. "It's burned. If they found us at the school, they know everything. So where do we go?" Deborah cried. "Where can we possibly go?" Nathan looked at her. His face was a mask of cold determination. "We go to the one place they won't expect. The place where this whole nightmare started." "Where?" "The cabin," Nathan said. "The hunting cabin in the Cascades. Where I died." Deborah looked at him. "But, you said you crashed the truck in a ravine." "The truck was the decoy," Nathan said. "The cabin is where I hid the leverage. If we want to survive this, Deb, we have to go back to the beginning." Deborah looked at the road ahead. The rain was starting again, washing the blood from her mind but not the fear. She was a fugitive now. An accomplice. And the man beside her was the only shield she had left. "Map it," she said, "and reload that gun." The Toyota Camry was dying a loud, rattling death. Every mile they put between themselves and the elementary school felt like a stolen breath. But the car was making it clear that their luck was running out. The engine temperature gauge was pinned in the red. Steam hissed angrily from under the buckled hood, and the wind howled through the shattered rear windshield, whipping Isaac's hair around his pale, tear-streaked face. "We can't keep driving this," Deborah shouted over the noise of the wind and the grinding transmission. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely keep the wheel steady. "The radiator is shot. We're going to seize up any second." Nathan sat in the passenger seat, his body angled so he could watch the road behind them through the side mirror. He had reholstered the gun, but his hand never strayed far from his waist. "We need to get off the I-5, he said, his voice calm, almost detached. "Take the next exit, Estacada. We need to disappear before the state troopers get a bolo on this car." "A what?" "Be on the lookout." Nathan translated automatically. Broken windshield. Front end damage. We're a rolling billboard for the police. Deborah signaled and took the exit ramp. The car shuddered violently as they slowed down. They were leaving the city sprawl behind, heading toward the foothills of the Cascades. The landscape was changing, strip malls giving way to Douglas firs and misty fields. "Where are we going, Dad?" Isaac's voice was small from the back seat. He was shivering, hugging his backpack to his chest. There were tiny shards of safety glass glistening in his sandy hair like diamonds. Nathan turned. For a split second, the cold calculation in his eyes softened. "We're going camping, buddy," he said, "just like we used to talk about. Remember?" "But, you shot a gun," Isaac whispered, "at school. He was trying to hurt you." Nathan said firmly. "I stopped him. Sometimes, good people have to do bad things to stop bad people. You understand that?" Isaac didn't answer. He just stared at his father with wide, terrified eyes. Deborah saw the look. It wasn't just fear. It was awe, and that terrified her more than the gunman. The Camry finally gave up the ghost 2 miles down a rural highway, sputtering and dying in front of a dilapidated gas station that looked like it belonged in a horror movie. A faded sign read "Greasy Pete's Fill Up," and a lone dog slept on the porch. "Coast it in," Nathan instructed. Behind the garage, out of sight. Deborah steered the heavy, silent car behind the building, crunching over gravel and weeds. As soon as they stopped, Nathan was moving. "Out," he ordered. "Grab the essentials. Leave the phones." "My phone?" Deborah clutched her purse. "It has all my contacts. My photos of Isaac. It has a GPS chip that pings every 30 seconds. Nathan said, snatching the purse from her. He dug out her phone and Isaac's tablet. "Do you want the photos? Or do you want the boy?" He didn't wait for an answer. He smashed both devices against the brick wall of the garage. The screens shattered. He kicked the pieces into the tall grass. "Come on," he said. They walked around to the front of the station. It was quiet. A rusty bell chimed as they entered the small convenience store. The air smelled of stale coffee and sawdust. An old man with a stained trucker hat was behind the counter, reading a newspaper. He looked up, his eyes narrowing at the sight of them, wet, disheveled, Isaac covered in glass dust. "Help you folks?" the man grunted. "Car trouble," Nathan said smoothly. His voice changed. The sharp, military edge vanished. He suddenly sounded like a hapless suburban dad. He even slumped his shoulders. Looking smaller, less threatening. Radiator blew on the highway. "My wife is pretty shaken up." The old man chewed on a toothpick. "Tow truck's out till Tuesday." "That's a shame," Nathan said. He walked toward the coffee pot. "Mind if I grab a cup? And maybe some water for the kid?" $2 a cup. Deborah stood by the door, holding Isaac's hand. She watched Nathan work. It was a performance. He was disarming the man with banality. "Hey," Nathan said, glancing out the window at a muddy Ford F-250 parked at the pump. "That your rig?" "Yeah," the old man said. "Why?" "Nice truck. '08 model? Those engines run forever." "It's an '06. But yeah, she runs." Nathan poured the coffee. He moved closer to the counter, fishing in his pocket for cash. He pulled out a wad of wet bills, money Deborah didn't know he had. "Here," Nathan said, putting a $20 bill on the counter. "Keep the change. Actually, do you have a bathroom key? My son." He gestured to Isaac. The old man looked at the boy, then sighed. He reached for a key on a hubcap attached to a wooden spoon. As the old man turned his back to grab the key, Nathan moved. It was so fast, Deborah almost missed it. Nathan's hand shot out, not for the bathroom key, but for the set of keys resting on the counter next to the register. He palmed them instantly, sliding them into his sleeve in one fluid motion. "Here," the old man said, turning back and handing over the bathroom key. "Thanks," Nathan said, smiling warmly. "Come on, Isaac, let's get you cleaned up." He ushered them toward the back. Once they were in the cramped, graffiti-covered bathroom, Nathan locked the door and turned to Deborah. "We have a vehicle," he whispered. "The truck outside." "You stole his keys?" Deborah hissed. "Nathan, that's grand theft auto. We're adding felonies by the minute. Would you prefer we wait for the hit squad to catch up?" Nathan asked, wetting paper towels to wipe the glass from Isaac's face. "The police are looking for a sedan. They won't be looking for a farm truck for at least another hour until he realizes his keys are gone." He knelt down, looking Isaac in the eye. "Isaac, listen to me. We're going to play a game. We're going to walk out there. Get in that big truck. And drive away. You need to be very quiet. Can you do that?" Isaac nodded slowly. "Like a spy mission?" "Exactly. Like a spy mission." Nathan kissed the boy's forehead. Deborah watched them. The tenderness was real. She could feel it. But the theft was also real. The violence was real. She was watching two different men inhabiting the same body. And she didn't know which one was in control. They walked out of the bathroom. Nathan returned the key to the counter. "Thanks," he said to the old man. "We're going to try and call a friend. Signal's better outside, right?" "Yeah, whatever," the man muttered, not looking up from his paper. They walked out the front door. The rain had turned into a steady, freezing drizzle. Nathan walked calmly to the Ford F-250. He unlocked the door with the stolen fob. "Get in," he murmured, low and quick. Deborah climbed into the cab. It smelled of wet dog and tobacco. Isaac scrambled into the middle seat. Nathan jumped into the driver's side. He started the engine. The diesel roared to life. Inside the store, the old man's head snapped up. He looked out the window. "Go," Deborah said, her heart hammering against her ribs. Nathan threw the truck into gear and punched the gas. The tires spun on the wet pavement. Then caught. They peeled out of the station, leaving the old man shouting and waving his fist in the rearview mirror. "I'm sorry," Deborah whispered to the shrinking figure of the old man. "I'm so sorry." "Don't be," Nathan said, his eyes scanning the road ahead. "He has insurance. We have survival." An hour later, they were deep in the mountains. The paved road had given way to gravel, and the gravel was quickly disappearing under a layer of pine needles and mud. The tall fir trees created a canopy that blocked out most of the gray light, plunging them into a premature twilight. The silence in the truck was heavy. Isaac had fallen asleep, his head resting on Deborah's shoulder, exhausted by the trauma. "You're good at this," Deborah said softly, breaking the silence. "At what?" "Stealing, lying, evading." She looked at his profile. The beard was gone, revealing the jawline she had kissed 1,000 times. But the set of his mouth was grim. "Where did you learn it, Nathan?" The real Nathan couldn't lie about eating the last cookie. Nathan tightened his grip on the steering wheel. The truck bounced over a deep rut. "I learned it in a place that doesn't exist," he said cryptically. "A black site. I was recruited 5 years ago. They told me I had a specific psychological profile. High adaptability. Low attachment. Low attachment? Deborah scoffed. You cried when our goldfish died. That was the mask, Nathan said. Or maybe that was the part of me they tried to burn out. They didn't succeed completely. He glanced at her. I thought about you every day. Deb. Every single day. That's what kept me sane. The memory of your pot roast. The way you hum when you fold laundry. The smell of your shampoo. Deborah felt a flush of heat. Those were intimate details. Specific details. If you're really him, she said, testing him, tell me what happened the night Isaac was born. Nathan smiled, a genuine, sad smile. It was a blizzard. February 12th. The roads were closed. We couldn't get to the hospital. You labored in the bathtub for 14 hours. I was on the phone with the 911 operator. Boiling water because I saw it in a movie. Feeling absolutely useless. Deborah's breath hitched. And when he came out, Nathan continued, his voice soft. He didn't cry. We were terrified. I held him. And he was so small. And you started singing to him. You sang, You Are My Sunshine. And he opened his eyes. And he looked right at me. Tears spilled down Deborah's cheeks. It was true. Every word. No file. No surveillance report could capture the terror and magic of that night in the bathroom. It is you, she whispered. It's me, he said, just different, broken. Suddenly, Nathan slammed on the brakes. The truck skidded in the mud, coming to a halt just inches from a fallen tree blocking the road. We're here, he said. Deborah looked out. There was no cabin, just dense, menacing woods. Where? The road ends here, Nathan said, killing the engine. We walked the last 2 miles. The cabin is up that ridge. He turned to her, his face serious. Deb, listen to me. Whatever you see up there, whatever we find, you need to know that I never wanted this life for us. I just wanted to build strip malls. He opened the door. The cold mountain air rushed in. Wake Isaac up, he said, pulling the gun from his waistband and checking the safety. And stay behind me. The woods have eyes. Deborah looked at the dark forest. It felt ancient and indifferent to their plight. She shook Isaac gently. Wake up, baby, she whispered. We're going for a hike. As they stepped out of the truck, the silence of the woods was absolute. No birds, no wind, just the sound of their own breathing and the click of Nathan's gun. Somewhere up that ridge, the answers were waiting, and Deborah had a terrible feeling that the truth might be more dangerous than the lie. The mountain didn't care about their fatigue. It didn't care that Deborah was wearing sneakers meant for grocery runs. Not scaling a 40-degree incline of slick mud and pine needles. It didn't care that Isaac's small legs were trembling with every step. They had been hiking for an hour. The silence of the Cascades was heavy, broken only by the sound of their labored breathing and the occasional snap of a twig underfoot. The air grew thinner, colder, biting at their exposed skin. Nathan led the way. He moved like a ghost, efficient, silent, constantly scanning the tree line. Every few minutes, he would stop, hold up a hand, and listen. He wasn't just navigating, he was hunting for hunters. Dad? Isaac whispered, his voice hitching. I'm cold. Nathan stopped. He turned back, his face grim but his eyes softening as they landed on his son. He stripped off his flannel shirt, leaving himself in just a gray thermal undershirt that clung to his muscular frame. Here, buddy, he said, wrapping the oversized shirt around Isaac. Button it up to the top. Traps the heat. What about you? Deborah asked, her teeth chattering. I run hot, Nathan said dismissively. Adrenaline is a hell of a heater. He looked at Deborah. Her hair was plastered to her forehead with sweat and rain. Her eyes were wide with fear. But her jaw was set. She was keeping up. 5 more minutes, he promised. Just over that ridge. You said that 10 minutes ago. Deborah challenged, though she kept climbing. This time I mean it, Nathan said. A flicker of a smile touched his lips, a ghost of the old Nathan. I never was good with time estimates on hiking trips. Was I? You said the Grand Canyon was a quick walk. Deborah recalled, a pang of nostalgia hitting her chest like a physical blow. Technically, it is, Nathan smirked, if you don't plan on coming back up. For a second, just a second, they were a normal couple bickering on a bad vacation. Then a crow cawed sharply overhead. And the illusion shattered. Nathan's eyes snapped back to the perimeter. The soldier returned. Move, he ordered softly. The cabin sat in a small clearing surrounded by towering Douglas firs. It wasn't the cozy, rustic getaway Deborah remembered from photos. Time and neglect had turned it into a gray, skeletal thing. Moss grew thick on the roof shingles. The front porch sagged dangerously to the left. The windows were grime-streaked eyes staring blindly into the woods. Stay here, Nathan commanded, pushing Deborah and Isaac behind a thick tree trunk at the edge of the clearing. Is it safe? Deborah asked. I don't know yet. Nathan drew the gun. He moved toward the cabin. Low and fast. He didn't use the front steps. He vaulted onto the porch railing, avoiding the rotted wood of the stairs. He checked the doorframe. He checked the window sill. He disappeared inside. Deborah held her breath. She clutched Isaac tight against her. 1 minute passed. 2. The silence was deafening. Mom? Isaac whispered. Shush. Finally, the front door creaked open. Nathan stood there, holstering the gun. He waved them over. Clear, he said. They ran across the clearing and up the steps. The inside of the cabin smelled of dead mice, mildew, and dust. It was a single room with a stone fireplace dominating one wall. A rusted cot sat in the corner. An old table with 3 chairs stood in the center, covered in a layer of grime. It's freezing in here, Isaac said, his voice echoing in the empty space. We can't light a fire, Nathan said immediately. Smoke is a signal, but there are blankets in the chest. Check for spiders first. Deborah went to the wooden chest at the foot of the cot. She pulled out 2 moth-eaten wool blankets. She wrapped one around Isaac and sat him on the cot. Okay, she said, turning to Nathan, we're here, we're freezing, we're fugitives. Now tell me why. Nathan was standing by the fireplace. He was running his hands along the rough, river rock stones of the hearth. He wasn't looking at her. He was counting. 3rd row down. 5th stone from the left. He muttered to himself. He pulled a small pocket knife from his jeans. He jammed the blade into the mortar between 2 large stones. He twisted. Grind. The stone moved. It wasn't mortar. It was a clever facade of silicone and grit. The stone slid out like a drawer, revealing a dark cavity behind the masonry. Deborah stepped closer. Mesmerized. You built a safe? When? You came up here to drink beer with your buddies. I came up here to install a dead drop. Nathan corrected. The beer was just cover. He reached into the hole and pulled out a heavy, black waterproof pelican case, about the size of a hardback book. He set it on the dusty table. He looked at it for a long moment. as if afraid to touch it. "This," he said, tapping the plastic case, "is why I had to die." He popped the latches. Snap, snap. Inside, nestled in foam, was a ruggedized hard drive and a thick, leather-bound notebook. "What is it?" Deborah asked. Nathan opened the notebook. The pages were filled with handwritten notes, codes, dates, and names. Hundreds of names. "I was a logistics contractor," Nathan began, his voice low. "I thought I was working for a private security firm, moving equipment, setting up secure comms for VIPs. It paid well, too well." He flipped a page. "But then I started noticing patterns. The equipment I moved ended up in conflict zones 2 days later. The VIPs I set up comms for, they were warlords, human traffickers, rogue state actors." "Oh my God," Deborah whispered. "I started digging," Nathan said. "I was good with data. Better than they thought. I found the ledger. This firm wasn't just security. It was a front for a shadow network called the Directorate. They don't work for any government. They work for the highest bidder. They destabilize regions, topple regimes, and sell the chaos." He looked at Deborah, his eyes haunted. "I tried to get out. I went to the FBI. But the agent I met, he was on the payroll. He tried to kill me in the parking garage. That's where I got this." He touched the scar on his forehead. "So I ran," Deborah realized. "You faked the crash." "I took the evidence," Nathan said, gesturing to the hard drive. "This drive contains the entire transaction history of the Directorate for the last 10 years. Names of senators, generals, CEOs, people who paid for assassinations, people who profited from wars. And the body? I had to disappear completely. If they thought I was alive, they would have tortured you to find this drive. So I bought a corpse. I burned the truck. I became a ghost." "Where did you go?" "Everywhere," Nathan said wearily. "Syria, Ukraine, Venezuela. I joined mercenary groups. I learned their tactics. I became one of them so I could stay one step ahead of them. I learned how to kill so they couldn't kill me." He looked at Isaac, who was watching from the cot, eyes wide. "I did it to keep you safe," Nathan said, his voice breaking. "But 5 years is a long time. Eventually, someone talks. Someone recognizes a face. They found me in Berlin 3 days ago. I knew they were coming here. I had to get to the drive before they did." Deborah stared at the black box. It wasn't just data. It was a nuclear bomb. It was the reason her life had been destroyed. "Why come back?" she asked. "Why not just send it to the New York Times from Berlin? Why come to the house?" "Because the encryption key isn't on the drive," Nathan said softly. He walked over to Deborah. He reached out and gently touched the silver locket she wore around her neck, a gift he had given her on their 10th anniversary. 6 months before he disappeared. "It's in here," he whispered. Deborah froze. She looked down at the cheap silver locket. She had worn it every day for 5 years. She had cried over it, slept with it. "You put the key around my neck?" she gasped. "You made me a target?" "No," Nathan said fiercely. "I made you invisible. They were looking for a digital key. They were hacking servers. They never thought a low-level construction manager would use analog steganography etched into a cheap piece of jewelry." He opened the locket. Inside was a tiny picture of Isaac. "Look closer," Nathan said. Deborah squinted. On the inside of the lid, scratched into the metal, were tiny, almost microscopic series of numbers. She had always thought they were just scratches from wear and tear. That's the code, Nathan said. Without this, the drive is useless junk. And without the drive, the code is just scratches. Deborah pulled away from him, her hand clutching the locket. Horror and anger warred in her chest. You used us, she accused. You used me as a mule. You put our son in danger every single day I wore this. I put you in the safest place I knew, Nathan argued, his voice rising, right under their noses, disguised as a grieving widow. If I had taken the key, they would have caught me and killed me. And then they would have come for you anyway to see what you knew. This was the only way. Stop fighting, Isaac yelled from the cot. He was crying now. Please stop fighting. The silence returned, heavy and suffocating. Nathan slumped. The fight went out of him. He looked like the exhausted, broken man who had collapsed on her porch the night before. I'm sorry, he whispered. I am so sorry, Deb. Deborah looked at him. She hated him. She loved him. She didn't know which feeling was stronger. Suddenly, Nathan's head snapped up. He held up a hand. Hush. What? Deborah breathed. I set a tripwire, Nathan whispered. On the trail, a tension line made of fishing wire. It just snapped. How do you know? Because the birds stopped singing, Nathan said. He moved to the window, peering through a crack in the boarded-up glass. Are they here? Deborah asked, moving to shield Isaac. Nathan watched for a long second. Then he turned back to them. His face was pale. It's not a tactical team, he said. They wouldn't be this loud. They wouldn't scare the birds like that. Then who is it? It's a drone, Nathan said. A hunter-seeker. Thermal imaging. A low, buzzing sound began to fill the air, like a swarm of angry hornets approaching from the valley below. It grew louder, vibrating against the rotting wood of the cabin walls. They're not sending men to retrieve the drive, Nathan realized, horror dawning in his eyes. They know I'm here. They know you're here. They've decided the asset is compromised. What does that mean? Deborah asked, though she already knew the answer. It means they're not here to arrest us, Nathan said, grabbing the pelican case and shoving the gun into Deborah's hand. They're here to bury us. He grabbed Isaac. Run, Nathan roared. Out the back, now. Boom. The front door exploded inward. Not from a kick, but from a concussive blast. Wood splinters flew like shrapnel. The drone hovered in the doorway. A black, arachnid shape with a single red eye and a mounted payload. It had found them. The explosion wasn't a fireball. It was a concussive wave of pressure that shattered the air itself. Deborah didn't remember moving. 1 second, she was standing by the table. The next, she was face down in the dirt behind the cabin, her ears ringing with a high-pitched whine that drowned out the world. Isaac was curled under her, trembling violently. Move, Nathan's voice cut through the ringing. He grabbed the back of her jacket and hauled her up. Don't look back, into the trees. They scrambled up the muddy slope behind the cabin. The rain had turned the ground into a slick, treacherous slide. Deborah slipped, her knees smashing against a hidden root. But adrenaline numbed the pain instantly. She gripped Isaac's hand so hard she felt his small bones shift, pulling him up the hill. Behind them, the cabin groaned. A second blast, smaller, sharper, echoed from inside. They're fragging the room, Nathan panted, pushing them toward a dense cluster of pines. Clearing the corners. They think we're hiding under the bed. What is that thing? Isaac cried, his voice hysterical. It's a hunter-killer drone, Nathan said grimly. Quad rotor, Thermal optics. Armed with micro-missiles and a 9mm repeater. It doesn't see light, Isaac. It sees heat. They reached the tree line. The darkness here was absolute. A heavy blanket of black. Nathan stopped, pressing them against the rough bark of a massive fir tree. "Listen," he whispered. Deborah held her breath. Her heart was hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. Whir click, whir click. The sound was mechanical, rhythmic, and terrifyingly close. It wasn't the roar of an engine, it was the angry buzz of a giant insect. Through the gaps in the trees, Deborah saw a red beam slice through the mist. It swept across the ground where they had just been running. The drone hovered over the ruins of the cabin's back door. Scanning, searching. "It's looking for heat signatures," Nathan hissed. "We're glowing like beacons right now. We've been running. We're hot." He looked at the ground. It was a churned-up mess of freezing mud and decaying pine needles. "Get down," he ordered. "In the mud. Cover yourselves." "What?" Deborah stared at him. "Do it." Nathan dropped to his knees and began scooping handfuls of freezing sludge. He plastered it over his neck, his face, his arms. "The mud is cold. It masks your thermal print. Cover Isaac first." Deborah dropped into the muck. The cold was shocking, stealing the breath from her lungs. She grabbed handfuls of the black, foul-smelling earth and smeared it over Isaac's coat, his face, his hair. "It's okay, baby," she whispered, her hands shaking. "It's just mud. It's just a game. Camouflage." Isaac was sobbing quietly, but he let her do it. He looked like a small swamp creature, eyes wide and white in the darkness. Deborah covered herself next, gasping as the icy mud slid down her collar. "Stay low," Nathan commanded. "We move belly to earth. Do not stand up." They crawled. For 20 minutes, they dragged themselves through the underbrush. Thorns tore at their clothes. Rocks scraped their skin raw. The cold seeped into their bones, making Deborah's teeth chatter so hard she had to bite her lip to keep silent. Every few minutes, the buzzing sound would return. The drone was quartering the area, flying in a grid pattern. It was methodical. It had no emotion, no impatience. It would search until its battery died or it found a target. "Dad," Isaac whispered, his voice barely audible. "I can't feel my fingers." Nathan stopped crawling. He looked back. In the gloom, he looked like a monster rising from the earth, eyes fierce, covered in slime. "We need shelter," he murmured to Deborah. "He's going hypothermic. The mud is working too well. It's sucking the heat out of him." "Where?" Deborah asked. "There's nothing out here." "There's a ravine," Nathan said, "about half a mile east. There's a rock overhang. It'll block the thermal scan from above. We have to make a run for it." "A run?" "If we crawl, he freezes," Nathan said, gesturing to Isaac's shivering form. "If we run, the drone might see us. It's a risk." "We run," Deborah said. She looked at her son. He was lethargic, his movements sluggish. "We run now." Nathan nodded. He handed Deborah the gun, the heavy black pistol. "Safety is off," he said. "If the drone spots us, it will drop to engage. It has a weak point, the sensor array on the underbelly. It looks like a glass bubble. If it comes low, you shoot the bubble." "Me?" Deborah stared at the gun. "Nathan, I've never fired a gun in my life. I'm a waitress." "Point and squeeze," Nathan said. "Don't aim. Just fill the air with lead. I'll carry Isaac." He scooped Isaac up into his arms. The boy was dead weight. "On 3, Nathan said. 1, 2, 3, go! They burst from the cover of the trees. The ravine was a black scar in the landscape ahead. They sprinted across a clearing of jagged rocks and scrub brush. Deborah ran blindly, following the dark shape of Nathan's back. Whir! The sound changed pitch. It went from a low buzz to a high scream. It saw us. Nathan yelled, "Don't stop!" A red light swept over them, illuminating the rain in sharp relief. Thwip, thwip, thwip. Dirt exploded around Deborah's feet. The drone was firing, small, suppressed rounds tearing up the earth. Zig-zag. Nathan roared, jinking left, then right. He slipped on a wet rock, nearly dropping Isaac, but recovered with a grunt of pain. The drone swooped lower. It was fast, faster than a bird. It banked around a tree, cutting off their path to the ravine. It hovered 10 feet off the ground, blocking their way, its single red eye fixed on them. The Gatling barrel under its nose spun up. "Deborah!" Nathan screamed. "Shoot it!" Deborah skidded to a halt. She raised the gun with both hands. It felt impossibly heavy. The rain blurred her vision. The red eye of the machine glared at her. Point and squeeze. She squeezed the trigger. Bang! The recoil shocked her. The bullet went wide, hitting a tree branch. The drone adjusted. The barrel pointed at her chest. Again, Nathan yelled, diving to cover Isaac with his own body. Deborah screamed, a primal sound of rage and terror. She pulled the trigger again and again. Bang! 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 Sparks flew from the drone's armored casing. But it didn't fall. It stabilized. Click! The drone's weapon jammed, a misfire. In that split second of mechanical hesitation, Nathan moved. He didn't run away. He ran at it. He still held Isaac in one arm. With his free hand, he grabbed a thick, fallen branch from the ground. He launched himself into the air. A desperate, mud-covered missile. He swung the branch like a baseball bat. Crack! The wood connected with one of the drone's 4 rotors. The propeller shattered. The machine shrieked. It lost stability, spinning wildly out of control. It careened sideways, smashing into the trunk of a pine tree before crashing into the mud. It lay there, rotors twitching, the red eye flickering. Deborah ran to it. She stood over the broken machine, her chest heaving, the gun smoking in her hand. The drone's camera lens focused on her. It was still transmitting. Someone, somewhere, was watching her. She raised her boot and stomped on the lens. Crunch! Glass shattered. The red light died. Silence rushed back into the woods, heavy and suffocating. "Did we get it?" Isaac asked, his voice trembling from where he lay on the ground. Nathan sat up. He was clutching his side. Dark blood was seeping through the mud on his shirt. "Nathan." Deborah dropped the gun and fell to her knees beside him. "You're hit." "Ricochet." Nathan grunted, wincing as he checked the wound. "Or shrapnel. It's not deep. Just messy." He looked at Deborah. His eyes were filled with a strange mixture of pride and shock. "You emptied the magazine," he said breathlessly. "You missed every shot, but you scared its sensors enough to make it hesitate." "I was aiming for the bubble," Deborah said, her voice shaking. Tears streamed down her face, cutting tracks through the mud. I thought we were dead." Nathan reached out and took her hand. His grip was weak but warm. "We're not dead," he said, "but we can't stay here. That drone has a GPS transponder. When it goes offline, they send a recovery team. A human team. We can't run anymore." Deborah sobbed. Isaac is freezing. You're bleeding. We have nowhere to go. Nathan looked toward the ravine. There's an old mining tunnel, he said, about 2 miles north. It's off the maps. I used it to stash supplies 5 years ago. Dry clothes, medical kits, a radio. 2 miles? Deborah looked at the endless, dark woods. It might as well be the moon. We can make it, Nathan said, forcing himself to stand. He swayed, then steadied himself. We have to. Because if they find us now, they won't use drones. They'll burn this whole forest down to flush us out. He picked up the gun Deborah had dropped. He checked it. Empty. He slid a fresh magazine from his pocket and reloaded it with a sharp clack. Deborah, he said, looking her in the eye. You're not just a mom anymore. You're a soldier. You hear me? You did good. Deborah wiped her face. She looked at her muddy hands. She looked at Isaac, who was watching her with awe. She nodded slowly. The fear was still there. But something else was growing alongside it. A cold, hard resolve. Let's go, she said. She bent down and picked up Isaac, hoisting him onto her back. I'll carry him. You lead. Nathan smiled, a bloody, grim smile. Lead the way, Mrs. Fisher. They turned north, disappearing into the shadows of the deep woods, leaving the broken carcass of the drone smoking in the rain. The trek to the mine took 3 hours. By the time they reached the hidden entrance, a wooden frame overgrown with blackberry bushes, dawn was threatening to break. The sky was turning a bruised purple in the east. Nathan cleared the brush and pried open the heavy wooden door. Inside, he said. They stumbled into the darkness. The air was stale and smelled of earth. But it was dry, and it was warmer than the freezing rain outside. Nathan fumbled for a lantern on a shelf. The strike of a match flared, and golden light flooded the small space. It was a small cavern, reinforced with timber. There were crates stacked against the wall. Sleeping bags. Canned food. It's real, Deborah whispered, setting Isaac down on a dry sleeping bag. You really planned for this. I hoped I'd never have to use it, Nathan said, sinking onto a crate. He pressed a hand to his bleeding side. Let me see, Deborah said. She found a first aid kit in one of the crates. She lifted his shirt. The wound was a jagged gash across his ribs. It was ugly, but as he said, not deep. This needs stitches, she said, her hands surprisingly steady. Do it, Nathan said. He bit down on a piece of leather strap from his bag. Deborah threaded the needle. As she worked, sewing her husband's flesh back together by the light of a kerosene lantern. She realized the life she knew, the diner, the mortgage, the PTA meetings, was gone. It was a dream she had woken up from. This, the blood, the mud, the silence of the cave, was her reality now. Done, she whispered, cutting the thread. Nathan spat out the leather. He took a long swig from a canteen of water. Deborah, he said softly. The drive. Give it to me. Deborah reached into her pocket and pulled out the Pelican case. She had grabbed it from the cabin before they ran. Nathan took it. He set it on the table. We have a choice, he said. We can hide here forever. Live like rats. Or, we can use this. Use it how? There's a contact, Nathan said. A journalist in Seattle. An old friend. If we can get this drive to her, if we can upload the data. The directorate falls. The hunt ends. But to get to Seattle, Deborah began. We have to go back to civilization. Nathan finished. We have to cross the dragnet. It's suicide. Deborah looked at Isaac, sleeping soundly in the warm bag. Then she looked at the gun on the table. They blew up a cabin to kill a 10-year-old boy. She said, her voice hard as steel. I don't want to hide. Nathan, I want to burn them down. Nathan looked at her. He saw the fire in her eyes. It mirrored his own. Okay, he said. He reached for the radio handset on the dusty shelf. Then let's go to war. The radio in the mine was a relic from the 80s. A blocky plastic box that hissed with static. But the voice cutting through the interference was crystal clear. Breaking news out of Clackamas County. A massive manhunt is underway for Deborah Fisher, 35, and an unidentified male accomplice, believed to be armed and extremely dangerous. Authorities say they have abducted Fisher's 10-year-old son, Isaac, following a violent altercation at Lincoln Elementary yesterday. Residents are advised to lock their doors. Nathan clicked the radio off. The silence that followed was heavy, pressing in on them like the weight of the mountain itself. They're spinning it, Deborah said, her voice hollow. She was sitting on a crate, cleaning the mud from her sneakers with a stick. They're making me the villain. An abduction? I'm his mother. It's standard protocol, Nathan said. He was checking the bandage on his side. The bleeding had stopped, but his face was pale. Sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool air of the mine. They control the narrative. If you're a monster, people won't help you. They'll call 911 the second they see you. So we can't hitchhike, Deborah concluded. No, we can't walk, and we can't drive a stolen car. Every license plate reader from here to Seattle is looking for us. Nathan stood up, wincing. He walked over to a dusty canvas duffel bag in the corner, part of his cache. He unzipped it. Inside were clothes. Not tactical gear, but generic, worn-out work clothes, flannel shirts, Carhartt jackets, trucker hats. Put these on, he ordered. Layer up. We need to look like locals. Hikers who got lost. No, too conspicuous. We need to look like we belong. Belong where? In the background, Nathan said. It's called being a gray man. You don't hide in the shadows, you hide in plain sight. You look so boring, so average, that people's eyes slide right off you. He tossed a faded blue oversized hoodie to Isaac. Hood up, buddy. Keep your head down. No eye contact with anyone but me or Mom. Isaac nodded, pulling the hoodie on. He looked terrified, but there was a set to his jaw that reminded Deborah so much of the man standing next to him. What's the plan? Deborah asked, pulling on a heavy canvas jacket that smelled of mothballs. There's a logging road that intersects the main highway about 4 miles down. Nathan said, there's a truck stop there. Big Al's. It's a hub for long haulers heading north. And then? Nathan checked the magazine of his pistol one last time. We become cargo. The descent from the mine was grueling. Without the adrenaline of the drone attack, the fatigue set in deep. Every step was a battle against gravity and exhaustion. Nathan was lagging, his breath coming in short. Sharp hitches. Deborah stayed close, ready to catch him if he fell. But he never did. He was running on sheer willpower. They reached the tree line above the highway just as the sun broke through the gray clouds. Below them, the highway was a ribbon of wet asphalt. And just as Nathan had predicted, there was a blockade. 4 state trooper cruisers were parked across the lanes. Lights flashing blue and red. Heavily armed officers were stopping every car. Checking trunks. Looking in backseats. But parked on the shoulder. Just before the blockade, was the truck stop. It was a chaotic scene of idling 18-wheelers. tired drivers grabbing coffee, and the smell of diesel and frying bacon. "We can't get past that blockade," Deborah whispered, crouching behind a fern. "They're checking everyone." "Exactly," Nathan said, "so we don't go through as passengers. We go through as freight." He pointed to a large, boxy white truck parked near the diner entrance. It wasn't a long hauler. It had a logo on the side, Cascadia Linen Service. "Laundry," Nathan noted. "That truck services the hotels and motels up and down the I-5 corridor. It picks up dirty sheets and drops off clean ones." "And it's heading north?" "Seattle has the biggest industrial laundromats," Nathan said. "Driver is inside getting breakfast. The back is probably unlocked. Most delivery guys don't lock up for a 10-minute coffee break." "We hide in the laundry?" Isaac wrinkled his nose. "It's gross," Nathan admitted, "but it's warm and soft, and dogs have a hard time tracking scents through the smell of commercial bleach and human sweat." "Okay," Deborah said, taking a deep breath. "Let's go." They moved through the parking lot like ghosts. Nathan led, keeping them between the rows of massive semi-trucks, using the noise of the idling engines to mask their footsteps. They reached the Cascadia linen truck. Nathan peered through the diner window. The driver, a burly man in a mariner's cap, was eating a plate of eggs. "We have 5 minutes," Nathan whispered. He went to the back roll-up door of the truck. He tried the latch. It clicked, unlocked. He slid it up just enough to crawl under. A wave of warm, humid air hit them, the smell of thousands of dirty hotel sheets. It was cloying and sour. But it was better than the freezing rain. "In," Nathan hissed. "Isaac first. Go to the back. Find a canvas cart and bury yourself." Isaac scrambled up. Deborah followed. Nathan came last, pulling the door down gently until it latched with a soft thud. Total darkness engulfed them. "Phone flashlights?" Deborah asked, her hand reaching for her pocket before remembering. "Right, no phones. Use your hands." Nathan's voice came from the dark. "Feel for the canvas bins. They're on wheels. Climb in. Cover yourself with sheets. Deep. At least 2 feet of laundry on top of you." Deborah fumbled in the dark. She felt the rough canvas of a laundry cart. She climbed over the rim, sinking into a pile of damp towels and sheets. It was disgusting, but she didn't care. She burrowed down, making a pocket of air near the side. "Isaac?" she whispered. "I'm here, Mom." His muffled voice came from the cart next to her. "It smells like feet. Just breathe through your mouth. Baby." "Nathan?" "I'm by the door," Nathan whispered. "I need to secure the latch from the inside so it doesn't rattle open." A moment later, the truck cab door slammed shut. The engine roared to life. The whole box shook. They were moving. The ride was a nightmare of motion sickness and anxiety. Every bump in the road threw them against the metal sides of the carts. Deborah lay in the dark, clutching the locket around her neck, praying to a God she hadn't spoken to in years. 10 minutes later, the truck slowed down. The brakes squealed. They had reached the blockade. Deborah's heart stopped. She buried her face in a coarse pillowcase, holding her breath. "Morning, officer," a voice boomed from the front. "The driver." "Morning," a stern voice replied. "License and registration, please. We're looking for a fugitive couple. Man and woman, maybe a kid." "Yeah, I heard on the radio. Crazy stuff. Here's my paperwork." Silence. Rustling of paper. "You carrying any passengers back there?" the officer asked. "Just dirty underwear and towels. Cap," The driver laughed nervously. Unless they're hiding in the hampers. Deborah froze. Don't open it. Please don't open it. Mind if we take a look? The officer asked. Be my guest. But warn you, it reeks. The sound of footsteps crunching on gravel. The sound of the rear latch being lifted. The roll-up door rattled upward. Light flooded the back of the truck. Harsh, gray daylight. Deborah squeezed her eyes shut under the pile of sheets. She tried to make her body flat. To disappear into the mass of fabric. Clear, the officer shouted. But then, another voice. Lower, colder. Run the dog. Deborah's blood turned to ice. A dog. Nathan had said the bleach might mask the scent. But might wasn't a guarantee. She heard the click of claws on the metal ramp. A sharp bark. The dog was inside. She could hear it sniffing. Snuffling at the base of the carts. It was moving closer. Sniff. Sniff. It was right next to her cart. She could hear the animal's heavy panting. Suddenly, a loud clang echoed from the front of the cargo hold. The dog barked aggressively, lunging toward the noise. Whoa, easy, the officer shouted. It's just the loose dolly. The driver said. Straps probably came loose. Metal on metal. The officer shone his flashlight toward the front. Looks clear. Just carts. All right, get that dog out of there. Come on, Buster. Heel. The claws retreated. The ramp rattled. The door slammed down, plunging them back into darkness. You're good to go, the officer yelled. Drive safe. The truck lurched forward. They picked up speed. They were through. Deborah waited 5 minutes before pushing the sheets off her face. She gasped for air, the adrenaline making her dizzy. Nathan? She whispered. Did you make that noise? I threw a lug nut at the wall. Nathan's voice came from the darkness. He sounded exhausted. Distraction. Oldest trick in the book. You saved us. She breathed. The bleach helped. Nathan muttered. But we're not safe yet. We're stuck in a metal box for 3 hours until this guy hits Seattle. Where in Seattle? Industrial District. Sodo. Probably. From there, we have to get to Pike Place Market. Why Pike Place? Crowds, Nathan said. Tourists. Chaos. It's the best place to meet a contact without being sniped. 3 hours later, the truck stopped. They waited until the driver got out and the sound of a warehouse rolling door opened. They heard voices, workers shouting, machinery humming. Wait for the unloading, Nathan instructed. When they roll us onto the dock, we jump and run. Chaos is our friend. The back door opened. A forklift whirred. Hey, heavy load today, Mike, a worker shouted. Yeah, heavy weekend at the motels. The driver replied. 2 workers grabbed the carts, the very carts they were hiding in, and rolled them onto a concrete loading dock. Clear, Nathan shouted, bursting out of his laundry cart like a jack in the box. Gun drawn but pointed at the ceiling. The workers screamed. One dropped his clipboard. Police operation, Nathan barked, flashing a badge he didn't have. He just held up his wallet quickly. Stay down, stay down. Deborah and Isaac scrambled out of their carts, shedding dirty towels. Move, move, Nathan directed them toward the side exit. The workers were too stunned to move. They just stood there, hands raised, watching 3 disheveled, mud-stained people sprint across the warehouse floor. They burst out of the side door into the rainy gray streets of Seattle. The city, the noise, the smell of exhaust and ocean salt. They were in an alleyway in the Sodo district. The Space Needle was visible in the distance, a white spire piercing the clouds. Nathan holstered his gun and leaned against a brick wall, sliding down until he was sitting on the wet pavement. He was gasping for air, clutching his side. Fresh blood was seeping through his jacket. "Nathan," Deborah knelt beside him. "You tore the stitches." "I'm fine," he wheezed. "Just need a minute." He looked up at her. His face was gray, his eyes losing focus. "Deb," he said, handing her a folded piece of paper. If I can't make the walk." "Don't you dare," Deborah said, grabbing his collar. "Don't you give me the 'go on without me' speech. We are a team. We are the Fishers. We don't quit." She pulled him up. She put his arm around her shoulder. "Isaac, take his other side," she commanded. "But Mom, he's heavy," Isaac said, grabbing his father's waist. "He carried you for 10 years," Deborah said fiercely. "Now we carry him." They stumbled out of the alley, merging into the flow of pedestrians on First Avenue. They looked like 3 homeless people helping a drunk friend, a common enough sight in the city that no one looked twice. They were in the gray. But the clock was ticking. The bleeding wouldn't stop. And the contact was waiting in the most crowded place in the city. And somewhere in a high-rise tower downtown, a facial recognition algorithm just flagged a camera feed from a warehouse loading dock. Target acquired. Seattle smells of rain, roasted coffee, and saltwater. To a tourist, it's the aroma of adventure. To Deborah Fisher, dragging her bleeding husband through the midday crowds of Pike Place Market, it smelled like a trap. The market was a throbbing organism of noise and color. Neon signs buzzed against the gray sky. Fishmongers shouted in a rhythmic chant, hurling massive glistening salmon through the air to the delight of screaming tourists. Buskers played violins and pounded on plastic buckets. It was chaos. It was perfect. "Keep moving," Nathan rasped. He was leaning heavily on Deborah. His arm draped over her shoulder like a drunk friend. His face was gray, the color of wet sidewalk cement. The makeshift bandage Deborah had applied in the warehouse was already soaked through. "Don't look at the cameras. Look at your feet. Look at the merchandise." "Where is she?" Deborah whispered, her eyes darting nervously. "Rachel the pig," Nathan said, his voice barely audible over the din of the crowd. "The big bronze piggy bank. She said she'd be wearing a yellow scarf." They shuffled forward. Isaac was clinging to Deborah's other hand, his hood pulled low. He wasn't looking at the flying fish or the fresh tulips. He was watching waistbands. He was watching hands. Nathan had told him, "Bad men don't look at the show. They look at the exits." They reached the intersection near the famous fish stand. The crowd was thick here. A wall of Gore-Tex jackets and umbrellas. And there she was, standing near the bronze pig, pretending to read a menu for a bistro. Was a woman in her late 30s. Sharp features, dark hair cut in a severe bob, and a bright yellow silk scarf tied loosely around her neck. Elena Vance, the journalist, the lifeline. Deborah steered Nathan toward a flower stall just 10 feet away from Elena. They pretended to admire a bucket of dahlias. "Is it her?" Deborah asked. Nathan squinted, sweat dripping into his eyes. "It's her. But she's standing wrong." "What do you mean?" "She's shifting her weight, tapping her foot. She's not just waiting, she's terrified. Scan the perimeter. Deb, clockwise. Start at the Starbucks." Deborah took a deep breath. She picked up a bouquet, using it to shield her face as she scanned the crowd. "Original Starbucks line. Tourists taking selfies. The bakery. A couple arguing over a croissant. The balcony railing. A man in a gray raincoat. Looking at the ferry boats on the water. Balcony. Deborah whispered. Gray raincoat. He's not looking at the water. He's looking at his watch. And he has an earpiece. Sector 2. Nathan grunted. Check the fish stand. Deborah looked. The fishmongers were shouting. Salmon in the air. A massive fish sailed over the heads of the crowd. People cheered. But behind the counter, near the ice machine, a man in a delivery uniform was standing too still. He wasn't laughing. His eyes were locked on Elena. We're blown, Nathan hissed. They got to her. They're using her as bait to flush us out. So we leave? Deborah asked, panic rising. No, Nathan said, his grip on her shoulder tightening painfully. If we leave, they kill her, and they hunt us down anyway. We have to make the drop. We have to change the game. How? Distraction, Nathan said. He pulled the Pelican case, the hard drive, from inside his jacket. His hand was shaking. Take this. Go to her. I'll draw their fire. No, Deborah almost shouted. You can barely stand. If you draw their fire, you're dead. I'm already dead. Deb. Nathan smiled weakly. I died 5 years ago. This is just overtime. He shoved the case into her hands, concealed by the bouquet of dahlias. When the fish flies, Nathan whispered, you run. Before Deborah could stop him, Nathan let go of her. He stumbled away, moving not toward Elena, but toward the fish stand. He didn't look like a threat. He looked like a dying man. But as he reached the crowd of tourists, he reached into his pocket. Not for a gun, for a lighter. He grabbed a stack of paper napkins from a condiment counter. He lit them. Fire. Nathan screamed. Fire. Gas leak. He threw the burning napkins into a trash can overflowing with cardboard and grease wrappers. The flame flared up instantly. Smoke billowed. Fire. Panic is a contagion. In a crowd packed this tight, it spreads faster than a virus. People screamed. The tourists surged backward. The fishmongers stopped chanting. In the chaos, the man in the gray raincoat on the balcony reached into his jacket. The delivery man behind the counter vaulted over the ice. They were distracted. Their eyes went to the fire. To Nathan, who was now slumped against a pillar. Coughing. Now, Nathan's voice echoed in Deborah's head. She didn't run away. She ran at Elena. Elena saw her coming. Her eyes widened in terror. She mouthed one word. Trap. Take it, Deborah hissed, slamming the Pelican case into Elena's chest. Upload it, now. Elena grabbed the case instinctively. They have snipers. Elena screamed. Get down. A sound like a staple gun. The bouquet of dahlias in Deborah's hand exploded. Petals flew like confetti. A bullet had passed inches from her wrist. Isaac, run. Deborah grabbed her son's collar and yanked him down behind the bronze pig statue. Bullets started to chew up the pavement. Peefed, peefed, peefed. Suppressed fire. The crowd was screaming, stampeding, trampling each other to get away from the fire and the unseen shooter. Deborah peeked over the bronze pig. Elena was gone. She had vanished into the stampede, clutching the drive. But Nathan was on the ground near the trash can. The man in the gray raincoat was advancing on him, a pistol drawn, moving methodically through the panicked mob. Dad! Isaac screamed. Deborah looked around. She had no weapon. She had thrown the gun away in the warehouse. All she had was adrenaline and a heavy metal flower vase she had grabbed from the stall. Stay here, she ordered Isaac. She didn't think. She couldn't think. She lunged out from behind the statue. The assassin in the raincoat was focused on Nathan. He was raising his gun for the kill shot. Deborah screamed, a guttural roar of pure maternal rage. She swung the heavy metal vase with both hands. Clang! She connected with the assassin's outstretched arm. The bone snapped with a sickening crunch. The gun flew skittering across the wet cobblestones. The man howled, spinning around. He was huge. He backhanded Deborah across the face. She flew backward, hitting the pavement hard. Taste of copper. Stars in her eyes. The assassin, clutching his broken arm, reached for a knife in his boot with his other hand. "You stupid bitch," he snarled. Thwack! A massive, 20-pound king salmon slammed into the assassin's face. He stumbled back, blinded by slime and scales. Standing 10 feet away, one of the fishmongers, a burly guy with a beard, stood in a throwing stance. "Hey," the fishmonger yelled. "Nobody hits a lady in my market." It was the most Seattle thing that could have possibly happened. The momentary distraction was enough. Nathan had crawled to the loose gun. He picked it up. His hand was shaking violently. Bang! One shot, unsuppressed, loud as thunder in the enclosed market. The assassin dropped, a clean shot to the chest. Silence rippled outward from the gunshot, freezing the crowd for a heartbeat before the screaming redoubled. Deborah scrambled to Nathan. He was conscious, but barely. His eyes were glassy. We gotta go," he slurred. "Police, 2 minutes." "Can you walk?" Deborah cried, pulling him up. "Down," Nathan whispered. "Go down the ramp. To the waterfront." They limped toward the ramp leading to the lower levels of the market. The labyrinth. As they descended into the gloom of the parking garage levels, leaving the sunlight and the sirens behind, Deborah looked back. Elena was gone. The assassin was dead. The fishmonger was staring at his hands. They had started a war in the middle of a tourist attraction. "Did she get it?" Nathan asked, his voice bubbling. "She took the drive," Deborah said, supporting his weight as they moved deeper into the shadows. "She ran." "Good." Nathan smiled, blood staining his teeth. "Now, the hard part." "What's the hard part?" Isaac asked, his voice trembling. "Staying alive long enough for her to publish it," Nathan whispered. He slumped against the concrete wall of the stairwell. His legs gave out. "Nathan," Deborah slapped his face gently. "Stay with me. We're not done." "I'm tired, Deb," he murmured. "So tired." Deborah looked at the wound on his side. It had torn open completely. He was losing too much blood. She looked at the grim, concrete corridor. They were trapped in the belly of the city. Above them, sirens wailed. Below them, the cold waters of Puget Sound. "Isaac," Deborah said, her voice shaking but resolute. "Find me a car. Any car with an old lock. We need to hotwire a ride." "I don't know how to hotwire," Isaac cried. "Dad taught you how the circuit works on your robotics kit," Deborah said. "Red to red, black to ground. It's just a big toy." "Isaac, go." Isaac ran down the row of parked cars. Deborah held Nathan's face in her hands. "You promised," she whispered fiercely. "You promised you'd come home. You don't get to die on a concrete floor in a parking garage." "Not after all this." Nathan looked at her. The blue-gray eyes were dimming. "I love you," he whispered. "Always, even when I was him." "Who?" "The ghost," he said. "The killer." I don't care who you were, Deborah said, kissing his forehead. I care who you are. And you are Isaac's father. So fight. Damn it. Mom. Isaac's voice echoed from down the hall. I found one. An old Jeep. The window is open. Deborah hauled Nathan up one last time. Hear that? She said. Your son found a getaway car. Don't you dare disappoint him. They moved toward the Jeep. But as they did, the elevator doors at the far end of the garage dinged softly. They opened. Two men in dark suits stepped out. They weren't police. They moved with the synchronized grace of predators. They saw the family. They raised their weapons. Get in the car, Deborah screamed, shoving Nathan into the passenger seat. She dove into the driver's seat. Isaac was already in the back, fumbling with the wires under the steering column like he'd seen in movies. Hurry, Isaac. Bullets sparked against the concrete pillar next to the car. I think I got it, Isaac yelled. He touched two wires together. Sparks flew. The engine coughed, then roared to life. Deborah slammed it into gear. She didn't reverse. She drove straight forward. Mom, the wall, Isaac screamed. Hold on. Deborah drove the Jeep straight through the wooden guardrail of the parking garage. They were on the third level. The car smashed through the wood and launched into the air. For a second, they were flying. Below them was the alleyway. Gravity took over. The Jeep nosedived, crashing onto a pile of dumpster bags filled with restaurant trash below. The suspension screamed. The airbags deployed. But they were moving. Deborah clawed her way out of the deflating airbag. She shifted into four-wheel drive. The Jeep climbed off the trash pile. Battered but functional. She floored it, speeding down the alley toward the waterfront, leaving the two suits staring down from the hole in the garage wall. We're alive, Isaac whispered from the backseat, his voice filled with awe. We're actually alive. Deborah looked at Nathan. He was unconscious, his head lolling against the window. Not yet, she whispered, merging onto Alaskan Way, speeding past the Ferris wheel. Not yet. The Jeep Wrangler, stolen and battered, limped into the parking lot of Fisherman's Terminal just as the sun began to dip below the Olympic Mountains. The sky was a bruised purple, reflecting off the dark, oily water of the marina. This wasn't the tourist side of Seattle. There were no sleek yachts or floating homes with flower boxes here. This was the working waterfront. Rust-streaked trawlers, crab boats that smelled of ancient bait, and the relentless industrial hum of generators. End of the line, Deborah whispered. She killed the engine. The silence that rushed in was heavy, broken only by the ragged, wet sound of Nathan's breathing next to her. He was unconscious again, his head lolled against the window. His skin the color of old parchment. The blood had soaked through his jacket, through the seatbelt, and was pooling on the rubber floor mat. Mom? Isaac's voice from the backseat was small, terrified. Is he? He's alive, Deborah said, her voice sounding strangely calm. It was the calm of someone who had no more room for panic. But we can't drive him to a hospital. And we can't stay in this car. She looked out at the rows of docked boats. Most were dark, their crews sleeping or in the local bars. But one boat, a weathered crabber named the Kingfisher, had a faint light in the wheelhouse. Isaac, she said, grab the first aid kit from the back of the Jeep. And that bottle of water. Where are we going? We're going to borrow a boat. Getting Nathan out of the Jeep and down the dock was a nightmare of physics and leverage. He was dead weight. Deborah draped his arm over her shoulder. her knees buckling under the strain. Isaac took his other side, gritting his teeth, his small face red with effort. They dragged him along the wooden planks, the sound of their footsteps swallowed by the lapping waves. They reached the Kingfisher. The gangplank was steep. "Hello?" Deborah called out softly. No answer. She tried the cabin door. Locked. "Isaac," she said, "the window." Isaac didn't hesitate. He grabbed a heavy brass cleat from the dock and smashed the small pane of glass in the door. He reached in, unlocked it, and pushed the door open. They half-carried, half-dragged Nathan into the galley. It smelled of diesel, stale coffee, and fish guts. Deborah swept a pile of charts off the metal table bolted to the floor. "Up here," she commanded. They heaved Nathan onto the table. He groaned, a low, guttural sound of pain that made Deborah flinch. "Lights," Deborah said. "Find me lights. And find me whatever alcohol is on this boat. Not beer. The hard stuff." Isaac scrambled. He found a switch, and a harsh fluorescent strip flickered to life overhead, casting clinical shadows across Nathan's face. He looked like a corpse already. Isaac opened a cupboard. "I found whiskey. And vodka." "Bring the vodka," Deborah said. "It's cleaner." She grabbed a pair of scissors from the galley drawer and cut Nathan's shirt open. The wound was horrific. The bullet from the market assassin hadn't hit a vital organ, but the fall and the movement had torn the stitches from the cave. The gash was wide, angry, and bleeding sluggishly. "He's losing too much blood," Deborah whispered to herself. "I can't stitch this. The skin is too shredded." She looked around the galley frantically. Her eyes landed on a drawer labeled "Galley Repair." She yanked it open. Screwdrivers, duct tape, superglue, and a soldering iron. A cordless, butane-powered soldering iron used for fixing electronics at sea. Deborah picked it up. She stared at the tip. "Mom?" Isaac asked, his voice trembling as he saw what she was holding. "What are you doing?" "Isaac," Deborah said, turning to him, "I need you to go to the wheelhouse. Find the radio, or a computer, anything that connects to the outside world. I need to know if Elena made it." "But..." "Go," Deborah shouted. "I need you to be the comms officer right now. Can you do that?" Isaac looked at the soldering iron, then at his father's pale face. He nodded, swallowing hard. "Yes, Mom." He ran out of the room. Deborah was alone with the ghost. She clicked the ignition on the soldering iron. A blue flame hissed, heating the metal tip until it glowed cherry red. She took a swig of the vodka, the cheap spirit burning her throat. Then she poured the rest over the wound. Nathan's body jerked, even in unconsciousness. "I'm sorry," she whispered, tears blurring her vision. "I am so sorry, my love." She pressed the glowing metal to the bleeding vessel. The smell of burning flesh filled the small cabin instantly. It was a smell Deborah knew she would never forget as long as she lived. Nathan screamed. His eyes flew open. They were wide, unseeing, filled with pure agony. He thrashed on the table. "Hold still," Deborah cried, throwing her body weight across his chest to pin him down. "Nathan, hold still. I'm saving you." He gasped, his back arching. He looked at her, recognition slowly dawning through the haze of pain. "Deb?" he croaked. "It's me," she sobbed, pulling the iron away. "I had to cauterize it. I had no choice." Nathan slumped back, panting, sweat pouring off him like rain. He looked down at his side. The angry red welt was ugly. Burned black. but the bleeding had stopped. "You," he wheezed, a faint, incredulous smile touching his lips. "You branded me. Consider it a wedding ring," she said, her voice shaking uncontrollably. She dropped the iron into the sink. "You're not going anywhere." Nathan reached out a trembling hand and touched her face. "You're amazing." "I'm terrified," she admitted, collapsing onto a stool next to him. "I'm just a waitress. Nathan, I shouldn't be doing this." "You're not a waitress anymore," Nathan whispered. "You're a survivor." Suddenly, the door to the wheelhouse burst open. Isaac ran in. He was holding a laptop. "Mom, Dad, look." He slammed the laptop onto the table, careful to avoid Nathan's legs. On the screen, a newsfeed was playing. CNN breaking news. But it wasn't the regular anchor. It was a shaky, handheld video feed. "I am Elena Vance," the woman on the screen said. She was sitting in what looked like a subway station. The tiles behind her grimy. She was bleeding from a cut on her forehead. But her voice was steady. "If you are watching this, I am likely dead or in custody. But the truth cannot be arrested." She held up the hard drive, the black Pelican case. For the past decade, a shadow organization known as the Directorate has been orchestrating global instability for profit. They have bought senators, assassinated activists, and started wars. The screen flashed. Documents began to scroll. Thousands of them. Bank accounts, emails, photos of meetings. "This is the Fisher ledger." Elena's voice continued. "It details every transaction, every name, every drop of blood. It is now public record. It has been sent to every major news agency, every government watchdog, and uploaded to the blockchain. It cannot be deleted." The video cut back to Elena. She looked directly into the camera. "To Nathan Fisher, wherever you are, you kept your promise. Now, the world knows." The feed cut to black. Then, the studio anchor reappeared, looking stunned. We are verifying these documents now. But sources at the Justice Department confirm that a massive cyber attack has exposed terabytes of classified data. Warrants are already being issued." Deborah stared at the screen. She felt lightheaded. "She did it," Deborah whispered. "She actually did it." Nathan looked at the screen. The relief on his face was so profound it looked like pain. He closed his eyes, a single tear leaking out. "It's over," he breathed. "The leverage is gone. We're not targets anymore. We're just witnesses." "Witnesses get protection," Isaac said, his eyes shining. "Right, Dad?" Nathan didn't answer. His breathing had hitched. Deborah looked at the monitor hooked up to the laptop. Isaac had apparently found a heartbeat sensor app on his smartwatch and strapped it to Nathan. The line was erratic. "Nathan?" Deborah said, touching his cheek. He was burning up. "Infection," Nathan murmured, his eyes still closed. From the swamp, the mud, the cauterization stopped the blood, but the fever. He opened his eyes. They were hazy. "Deb, the boat, the Kingfisher. What about it?" "Check the lazarette. The storage under the rear deck." "Why?" "Because," Nathan whispered, "this isn't just a random boat. I know this boat. It belongs to an old friend. A safe friend. Look for the adrenaline." Deborah looked at him. "You steered us here, even while you were unconscious?" "Muscle memory." He smiled faintly. "Or maybe I just got lucky." Deborah ran to the back of the boat. She lifted the heavy hatch. Inside, hidden among fishing nets, was a waterproof barrel. She cracked it open. It wasn't fish. It was a cache. medical supplies, antibiotics, EpiPens, saline bags, and a satellite phone. He planned everything. Deborah whispered to the cold air. He planned for every single disaster. She grabbed the antibiotics and the saline. She ran back to the galley. I found it, she cried. IV bags. Ciprofloxacin. She set to work. She wasn't delicate. She stabbed the IV needle into his arm with the desperation of a drowning woman clutching a rope. She hung the bag from the light fixture. The antibiotics will take hours to work, she said, smoothing his hair back. We just have to wait. We can't stay here, Isaac said, looking at the laptop again. Mom, look at the comments. People are tracking the IP address of the upload. They know Elena was in Seattle. The bad guys, the ones who aren't arrested yet, they'll be desperate. They'll be looking for loose ends. We are the loose ends, Nathan rasped. Then we move, Deborah said. She went to the wheelhouse. She looked at the controls of the trawler. It was an old diesel engine. Simple, reliable. She looked at the ignition. No key. Hot wire? She asked Isaac, who had followed her. Isaac grinned, pulling a multi-tool from his pocket. Red to red, black to ground. The engine of the Kingfisher coughed, sputtered, and then rumbled to life with a deep, throaty roar that vibrated through the hull. Deborah grabbed the wheel. She looked out at the dark water of the Puget Sound. Beyond lay the Pacific Ocean. Beyond that, Canada, or Alaska, or nowhere. Cast off the lines, Isaac, she ordered. Isaac ran to the deck. He threw the ropes onto the dock. Deborah pushed the throttle forward. The old boat shuddered and began to move, carving a white wake through the black water. They were leaving Seattle. They were leaving their house, their mortgage, their school, and their past lives. As they passed the breakwater, heading into the open chop of the Sound, Deborah looked back at the city skyline. It was glittering like a jewel box. Somewhere in there, police were swarming, journalists were typing, the world was burning down and rebuilding itself. But here, in the dark wheelhouse, it was just the three of them. She walked back to the galley. The IV was dripping steadily. Nathan was sleeping, a real sleep this time. Aided by the medicine, his chest rose and fell in a rhythm that matched the waves. Deborah sat on the floor, leaning her head against his leg. Isaac curled up next to her, resting his head on her shoulder. "Mom?" Isaac whispered. "Yeah, baby? Are we bad guys now? We stole a car. We stole a boat." Deborah looked at her son. She kissed the top of his head, smelling the mud and the salt and the bleach. "No, Isaac," she said softly, "we're not bad guys. We're just complicated." She looked at the GPS screen glowing green on the wall. "Destination unknown. Get some sleep," she said. "I'll take the first watch." Outside, the wind picked up, howling a song of freedom and danger. The Kingfisher plowed ahead, carrying a counterfeit husband, a fugitive wife, and a boy who knew too much. Into the vast, indifferent ocean. The story wasn't over, but the chapter of lies was closed. The Pacific Ocean at 3 a.m. is a void. No stars, no moon, just an endless, churning blackness that swallowed the light from the Kingfisher's navigation lamps. Deborah gripped the wheel, her knuckles white. The old trawler was fighting the swells, groaning with every wave that smashed against its rusted hull. The GPS screen glowed green, showing a dotted line ahead, the maritime border. Canada, sanctuary. 20 miles, she whispered to herself. Just 20 miles. Behind her, in the galley, Nathan was awake. The antibiotics and the saline had pulled him back from the edge. But he was still weak. He sat propped up against the bulkhead, Isaac sleeping fitfully with his head on Nathan's uninjured leg. Nathan was watching the radar screen, a vintage monochrome CRT monitor that swept a ghostly green arm in a circle every 4 seconds. Sweep. Nothing. Sweep. Nothing. Sweep. Blip. Nathan frowned. He leaned closer, wincing as the movement pulled at his cauterized side. Sweep. Blip. It was small, fast, and it was coming from the south, directly from Seattle. Deb, Nathan called out. His voice was raspy but alert. Kill the running lights. Now. What? Deborah turned her head. It's pitch black. We'll hit a log. Kill them. Nathan barked. We have a shadow. 3 miles out and closing at 40 knots. That's not the Coast Guard. Coast Guard hails you on Channel 16. These guys are running silent. Deborah didn't argue. She flipped the master switch. The boat plunged into total darkness. The only light came from the dim glow of the instrument panel. Is it them? She asked. Her voice tight. The directorate is exposed, Nathan said, pulling himself up to look out the rear porthole. They're burning assets. Cleaning house. They can't let us testify. A boat accident at sea, no witnesses. No bodies. Just a tragic end to a fugitive family. What do we do? Deborah asked. We can't outrun 40 knots. This tub tops out at 12. Nathan looked around the wheelhouse. He looked at the controls. He looked at the deck behind them, piled high with heavy steel crab pots and coils of thick rope. We don't run, Nathan said grimly. We fish. 10 minutes later, the sound of the pursuing boat was audible over the wind, a high-pitched whine of high-performance outboard engines. Isaac, Nathan said, shaking the boy gently. Wake up, son. I need you to be brave one last time. Isaac rubbed his eyes. Are we there? Not yet, Nathan said. I need you on the winch controls. You know the levers? The ones that drop the pots? Yeah, green for down, red for up. Good. When I say green, you jam that lever down and you don't let go until I say stop. Understand? Why? Because we're going to catch a shark, Nathan said. He turned to Deborah. Keep your heading. Let them think we don't see them. When they get within 100 yards, they'll turn on their spots to blind us. When that light hits, you cut the wheel hard to port. Hard as you can. That'll capsize us, Deborah protested. It'll swing the stern around, Nathan corrected. It'll put the heavy steel pots between us and their bullets. It's a shield. The whine of the engines grew to a roar. Suddenly, the night exploded in white light. A million candle power spotlight from the pursuing boat, a sleek, black rigid inflatable boat, rib, slammed into the wheelhouse of the Kingfisher. Deborah threw her arm up. Blinded. Crack, crack, crack. Bullets tore through the wooden walls of the cabin. Glass shattered. Down, Nathan roared. Deborah ducked below the dash. Isaac curled into a ball on the floor. Nathan grabbed the flare gun from the emergency kit, the only weapon they had left. Now, Deb, hard port. Deborah grabbed the spokes of the wheel and yanked it left with all her strength. The old trawler groaned in protest. The hull banked violently, tipping dangerously. Dishes crashed in the galley. The sudden turn swung the back of the boat around, presenting the massive stack of steel crab cages to the attackers. Ping, ping, ping. The bullets hammered harmlessly against the steel cages. Isaac, The lever. Nathan screamed. Isaac reached up and slammed the green lever down. On the back deck, the hydraulic winch screamed. The locking pins released. A string of 10 massive steel crab pots, each weighing 700 pounds, rolled off the stern rail. They didn't just fall, they plummeted, connected by a thick, heavy line. The attackers in the rib were too close. They had accelerated to cut off the trawler, expecting it to keep going straight. They didn't expect a wall of steel to be dropped directly in their path. The first pot hit the water with a massive splash. The line went taut. The RIB's pilot tried to swerve, but momentum was against him. The heavy line snagged the RIB's propeller. Screech. The sound of metal shearing metal was horrific. The RIB's engine was ripped from its mount. The boat pitched forward violently. The bow diving underwater as the weight of the sinking crab pots dragged it down like a hooked marlin. Men screamed. The spotlight spun wildly, illuminating the chaotic spray. "Did we get them?" Isaac yelled over the noise. "Keep turning," Nathan shouted to Deborah. "Don't let the line snap. Drag them." Deborah held the wheel. The trawler shuddered as the weight of the sinking enemy boat acted like a massive anchor. Then, silence. The rib had capsized. The spotlight went dark. The engine noise died. Nathan pulled himself up to the window. He raised the flare gun and fired a single red phosphorus shell into the sky. It hissed upward, hanging in the air, bathing the ocean in a bloody red light. Below, in the water, the black hull of the rib was floating upside down. Debris bobbed in the waves. There was no movement. The cold Pacific had claimed them. "It's done," Nathan whispered, lowering the flare gun. His hand was shaking uncontrollably. He looked at Deborah. She was staring at the water, her chest heaving. Did we kill them?" she asked softly. "The ocean did," Nathan said. "We just gave it a little help." He slumped back against the bulkhead. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind a bone-deep exhaustion. "Get us back on course, Captain," he murmured. "Take us to Canada." Dawn broke 2 hours later. It wasn't a glorious, golden sunrise. It was a slow, gray lightening of the eastern sky. But to the 3 people on the bridge of the Kingfisher, it was the most beautiful thing they had ever seen. The GPS beeped. Entering Canadian waters. Deborah let out a breath she felt she had been holding for 48 hours. She throttled back the engine. The roar died down to a gentle idle. They drifted in the silence. The water here was calm, protected by the islands of British Columbia. Isaac was asleep on the floor, wrapped in a survival blanket. Nathan was awake, watching the coastline appear through the mist. Trees, mountains, a lighthouse blinking in the distance. Deborah left the wheel and sat down next to him. She didn't say anything, she just took his hand. Nathan looked at her. His face was gaunt, scarred, and aged 10 years in 2 days. But his eyes, those blue-gray eyes, were clear. "We made it," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "We're homeless," Deborah said, a hysterical laugh bubbling up. "We're broke. We're fugitives in a foreign country. And I think I need a tetanus shot." "We're alive," Nathan corrected, "and we're together." He reached into his pocket, the pocket of the jacket he had stolen from the truck stop. "And we're not broke," he said. He pulled out a small, waterproof pouch. He opened it. Inside were diamonds. Uncut, raw diamonds. A handful of them. Deborah stared. "What?" "The directorate paid in many ways," Nathan said. I kept a stash. For a rainy day. I grabbed it from the cabin before the drone hit. You had diamonds in your pocket the whole time? Deborah asked, incredulous. While we were hiding in laundry? While we were begging for a ride? I couldn't risk using them. Nathan said. They leave a trail if you try to sell them. But now we can start over. A new life. New names. Deborah picked up one of the stones. It was cold and hard. It represented freedom. Who do you want to be? Nathan asked softly. Deborah looked at the horizon. She thought about the waitress who scrubbed pans. She thought about the woman who shot a drone. She thought about the captain who sank a hit squad. I don't know, she said, but I know who I don't want to be. I don't want to be afraid anymore. She looked at Isaac, sleeping peacefully. He needs a school, she said, a real school. No more running. Agreed, Nathan said, maybe somewhere quiet, a fishing village. I think I'm getting the hang of this boat thing. Deborah laughed. It was a real laugh. Loud and free. You almost sank us twice. Nathan. Key word. Almost. She leaned in and kissed him. It tasted of salt and fatigue and victory. Welcome home, Nathan, she whispered, whoever you are. I'm just Harry, he said, testing a new name, Harry Miller. And this is my wife, Sarah, and our son, Jack. Harry Miller, Deborah repeated. Sounds boring. Boring is good, Nathan said, closing his eyes. Boring is heaven. The sun finally broke through the clouds, casting a beam of light onto the deck of the Kingfisher. The battered boat chugged slowly toward the shore, carrying a family that had died and been reborn in the cold waters of the Pacific. The nightmare was over. The legend of the Fisher family was just beginning. Peace is a strange thing. When you have lived in a war zone, whether it's a battlefield in Syria or a kitchen filled with the silence of grief, peace feels suspicious. It feels like the eye of the storm, waiting for the winds to return. It took 6 months for Deborah Fisher to stop flinching when the mailman dropped a package on the porch. It took 6 months for Isaac to stop checking the exits whenever they entered a room. And it took 6 months for the man formerly known as Nathan Fisher to learn how to sleep without a knife under his pillow. Prince Rupert, British Columbia. 6 months later. The town of Prince Rupert sits on the edge of the world. Shrouded in mist and surrounded by ancient cedar forests. It smells of rain, pine resin, and the cold, clean salt of the North Pacific. It is a place where people come to disappear. Or to be found. On a rocky bluff overlooking the harbor stood a small, weathered A-frame cabin. Smoke curled lazily from its stone chimney. Inside, the morning light filtered through the large windows, illuminating a simple wooden table. Harry, can you pass the syrup? The man at the head of the table looked up from his newspaper. His beard had grown back, thicker this time, streaked with gray. The scar on his forehead was still there, a jagged white line, but the haunted look in his blue-gray eyes had been replaced by something softer. A quiet contentment. Sure thing, Jack, the man said, sliding the bottle across the table. Isaac, now known as Jack Miller to his teachers and friends, drowned his waffles in syrup. He was taller now. His shoulders were broader. He wore a soccer jersey from the local youth league. You have practice today? The man asked. Yeah, coach says I'm starting forward next week. The boy beamed. He says I'm fast. You're fast. The man agreed, taking a sip of coffee. Fastest kid I know. He winked at the woman standing by the stove. Deborah, now Sarah Miller, smiled back. She looked different. Her hair was cut short. a stylish bob that framed her face. She wasn't wearing the tired uniform of a diner waitress. She wore a thick wool sweater and jeans stained with clay. She had taken up pottery, a hobby she had dreamed of for years but never had the time or money for. The diamonds in Nathan's pocket had bought them more than a house. They had bought them time. "Don't forget your cleats," she reminded the boy, "and your inhaler." "Mom, I haven't used my inhaler in months." Jack groaned. "Take it anyway," she said firmly, but her eyes were laughing. They were a normal family. Boring, mundane. Harry worked at the boatyard, repairing diesel engines. Sarah sold pottery at the weekend market. Jack played soccer. To the neighbors, they were the Millers, a quiet family from Oregon who moved north for a simpler life. Nobody asked about the past. In Prince Rupert, nobody cared about who you were, only who you were today. Later that afternoon, Harry stood in the boatyard, wiping grease from his hands with a rag. The shop radio was playing softly in the background, a CBC News broadcast. And in international news, the fallout from the so-called Fisher Ledger continues. Former Senator James Sterling was indicted today on 40 counts of conspiracy and treason. This marks the 20th high-profile arrest since the documents were leaked by Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist Elena Vance 6 months ago. Harry stopped wiping his hands. He leaned against the hull of a fishing trawler, listening. The Directorate, the shadowy organization implicated in the files, has been effectively dismantled. According to Interpol, its assets have been frozen, and its leadership is either in custody or deceased. Harry let out a long, slow breath. The tension that lived permanently in his shoulders, a knot of muscle and paranoia, finally loosened. It was real. It wasn't a trap. The monster was dead. He looked down at his hands. They were scarred, rough, stained with oil. These were the hands that had killed a man in a market. These were the hands that had built a safe house. These were the hands that had held his son while they hid in a laundry truck. But today, they were just the hands of a mechanic. Harry. He turned. His boss, a burly Canadian named Gordy, waved from the office. "You done with that alternator?" "Just finished." "Gordy," Harry called back. His voice was steady. "She purrs like a kitten." "Good man. Go home to your wife. It's supposed to storm tonight." "Will do." Harry walked out of the boatyard. He didn't check his six. He didn't scan the rooftops. He just walked, listening to the seagulls and thinking about what to make for dinner. The storm hit that evening, lashing the cabin with rain and wind. But inside, it was warm. They had finished dinner, roast chicken and vegetables, and were sitting by the fire. Jack was doing homework on the rug. Sarah was reading a book. Harry sat in the armchair, whittling a piece of cedar. He was making a small bear for Jack. Sarah looked up from her book. She watched him for a long moment. She saw the way the firelight played on his face. She saw the burn scar on his side, hidden beneath his shirt, the brand she had given him on the boat. "What are you thinking about?" she asked softly. Harry stopped whittling. He looked at the fire. "I was thinking about the cabin," he said, "the one in the woods. Before the drone." Sarah stiffened slightly. They rarely talked about the event. "What about it?" "I was thinking about what I told you," Harry said, "about being a counterfeit, about being a fake." He put the knife down. He looked at her, his eyes intense. "I spent 5 years pretending to be someone else to survive. And then I came back and pretended to be the man I used to be. I felt like a ghost wearing a costume. You're not a ghost, Nathan, Sarah whispered, using his real name for the first time in months. Ghosts don't bleed. Ghosts don't fix alternators. Ghosts don't love. I know, he said, but sometimes I wonder. The man you married 10 years ago. The man who built strip malls and was afraid of spiders, he's gone. Isn't he? Sarah closed her book. She walked over to him and sat on the arm of his chair. She ran her hand through his graying hair. Yes, she admitted, he's gone. That Nathan died in a ravine. She took his hand, the rough, scarred hand of a soldier, and placed it against her cheek. But the man sitting here? The man who saved our son? The man who drove a boat through a wall of bullets to get us to safety? I know him. She kissed his forehead, right on the scar. And honestly, she whispered, I like this one better. He's tougher. And he appreciates my cooking more. Harry laughed. It was a deep, rumbling sound that came from his chest. I do, he said. Your roast chicken is worth dying for. Let's stick to living for it. She smiled. Dad, Mom, Jack called out from the floor. Look. He pointed to the window. Outside, the storm had broken. The clouds were parting, revealing a night sky littered with stars. And there, shimmering above the dark ocean, was a faint curtain of green light. The aurora borealis. Lights out, Harry whispered. He got up and turned off the lamps. The cabin plunged into darkness, illuminated only by the dying embers of the fire and the celestial show outside. They stood together at the window, a father, a mother, and a son. They watched the lights dance. Green, purple, and white ribbons weaving through the stars. It was magic. It was wild. It was free. Harry put his arm around Sarah. She leaned into him. Jack squeezed in between them. For the first time in his life, the man who had been a spy, a mercenary, a ghost, and a counterfeit husband, felt completely, terrifyingly real. He didn't need a mission anymore. He didn't need a target. He had a home. Is it true? Jack asked, looking up at the lights. That the lights are spirits? Some people say that, Harry said softly. They say they are the souls of warriors. Dancing. Are you a warrior, Dad? Harry looked at his reflection in the glass. He looked at the family he had fought the world to keep. No, Jack, he said, I'm just a dad. And as the northern lights faded into the dawn of a new day, Nathan Fisher, or Harry Miller, or whatever name the world chose to give him, finally let go of the knife he had been holding in his mind for 5 years. He was home, and this time, he was staying.